Because of her long black hair, she was abandoned by her homeland. Her family pushed her onto the execution block. Then she was reborn more than 10 years into the past. She decided to steal her younger sister's future husband and take revenge on her country. Her father gathered the whole family together. Emperor Jirbin of Chariot wanted to marry a princess as his official consort. Rose already knew her father would choose her younger sister. Back then, she had no thoughts of romance at all. She felt that, as the older sister, she should give way to her younger sibling. Only now did she understand. She had been nothing more than a pawn. Her parents had never considered her at all. Her younger brother spoke the exact same lines as in her previous life, strongly supporting their father's decision. Her younger sister also looked terrified that the opportunity might slip away. But this time, sorry, I don't agree. Her brother shot her a vicious glare. Her parents stared at her in shock. Her mother even said that an older sister should yield to her younger sister. Rose felt her family's shamelessness was thicker than castle walls. She knew her sister would make an excellent empress. But Emperor Jirbin was notorious for his violent temper. Countless people had been beaten half to death over a single sentence. It was even said that the previous emperor had died at his hands. Her sister started trembling in fear the moment she heard that. And these rumors were not baseless. Rose remembered the battlefield in her previous life. Emperor Jirbin had used his own soldiers as human bombs. That alone showed exactly what kind of man he was. And on top of that, he had 6 mistresses, all of whom regarded each other as mortal enemies. Once an official consort entered the palace, anyone with half a brain could guess who they would target. Rose went to stand behind her younger sister, looking deeply worried. How could she bear to let her little sister suffer alone in a foreign land? Thinking back to her previous life, her sister had started sending letters in less than a month, crying every day that she wanted to come home. She had even complained that the emperor wouldn't touch her. Truly shameless. So let me marry him instead. I am willing to shield my sister from wind and rain. Their parents, who had still been hesitating, agreed at once. Rose's younger sister even hypocritically said she would miss her. A month later, Rose and Emperor Jirbin held a grand wedding. She was already prepared to face every scheme and plot. Compared to the 10 years of pain she had endured in the past, the jealous tricks between mistresses were nothing. This time, she would walk beside this man and personally destroy her own country. But right after the wedding, the emperor abandoned Rose and left. He thought the jealousy of his mistresses was cute, so he had no intention of helping her. Sure enough, on the very first day of marriage, Rose was neglected. She did not see even a single maid. The only person by her side was Exa, the attendant she had brought with her. He was the only one who had never harmed Rose. Back when she was in prison, Xian had been the one to bring her food and tell her in detail everything that was happening outside. Looking at the empty room, Rose decided it was time to do something. Remembering how her sister had written to complain about being ignored, she knew exactly how arrogant these maids were. But she was not about to swallow her anger. She called to the 2 maids cleaning by the door, "Bring me a glass of water." Not one of them paid her any attention. Rose casually grabbed one of them. "Are you deaf?" The maid was shoved hard to the ground. With a whoosh, a ball of flame rose from Rose's palm. "Who's the one behind this? If you don't talk, I'll burn off your hair." The maids were scared out of their wits. They said the head maid had ordered them to do it. The other maids all told the same story. Such low-ranking servants, yet this arrogant. "Exine, bring me the head maid." All Rose had wanted was to have someone clean her room, yet that sharp-tongued old hag mocked her instead. The Empress is nothing but a decoration in the palace. His Majesty's harem is full of beauties. It's generous enough that you've been given a place to stay. Just listen to the nonsense she was spouting. A mere maid, and she dared to be this bold. "Sorry, but I didn't marry into this place just to be bullied." Rose kicked the door shut with one foot, blocking the maid's way. "It seems you still don't understand the situation. Even if I am just a decoration, so what? As Empress, why shouldn't I deal with a servant?" Though she seemed to be questioning the maid, it sounded more like she was questioning the family that had treated her so unfairly. The head maid was frightened by the twisted look on Rose's face. Putting on a fierce front while clearly lacking courage, she weakly tried to argue back, even claiming she represented the emperor. "In that case, let's see whether if this precious maid gets hurt. The emperor chooses you or me, this decoration." The head maid was on the verge of tears. Why had she run into a madwoman this time? Before she could understand what was happening, Rose had already grabbed her by the hair. Taking the scissors she had prepared long ago, Rose decided that today she would make this maid start life over from the top. Don't move. It'd be bad if you got hurt. The head maid had completely lost her earlier arrogance. Her survival instinct made her struggle desperately. With one snip after another, her already plain face only became more disastrous. Her pig-like screams echoed through the whole room. What trash! Such a tiny injury, and she screamed like that. The head maid trembled nonstop as she begged for mercy. I was wrong. I'll go find someone to clean the room right away. But apologizing now was already too late. Rose lunged at her with the scissors in hand. In the darkness, all that could be heard was snip after snip. It had to be said, the haircut was impressive, though her new hairstyle really wasn't flattering. Rose's fearsome reputation as imperial consort quickly spread through the harem, growing more exaggerated with every retelling. They said that to become the heir, she had bullied her younger brother and used her powerful magic to coerce the king. Her nickname, the Bat Princess, was also dug up. In Bihari, she was infamous as a wicked woman. The emperor, however, didn't care much about her bullying the maids. To him, it was just pointless struggling. But before one wave had settled, another rose. As the empress, she had the duty to attend the noble ladies' tea party. What Rose cared about more was whether the mistresses would be there. She was still debating whether to attend when she saw the host's name, and her expression changed instantly. It was Elisa, the emperor's fourth mistress, the one most skilled at stirring up trouble. The reason Rose reacted so strongly was that in her previous life, when her eyes had been gouged out, it was this fourth mistress who had led the other mistresses in humiliating her in prison. Since they were going to cross paths anyway, Rose might as well deal with one of them first. Meanwhile, the tea party had already begun. Everyone was busy flattering Elisa because her family owned mines. She had enough money to buy several cities. While praising the fourth mistress, they did not forget to mock the empress too. Every word out of their mouths was nasty. Elisa was basking in self-satisfaction when Rose made a dazzling entrance in gorgeous clothes. Several of the emperor's little mistresses couldn't be bothered with her, but Elisa warmly invited Rose to sit. That pretentious face of hers was exactly the same as Rose remembered from her previous life. And the moment she opened her mouth, the women beside her echoed her every word. We heard you stole the position of official consort from your younger sister. We also heard you brought only one male attendant with you. Is that true? If they weren't being sharp-tongued, they didn't know how to speak at all. Rose simply watched their performance calmly. But then someone called her an illegitimate child. Elisa got even more excited, standing beside His Majesty with black hair like that. How embarrassing. His Majesty's hair is a pure silver white. But such words meant nothing to Rose. She was not that fragile. I just don't know, Miss Elisa. If you became pregnant with His Majesty's child, would that child be illegitimate? With just one soul-piercing question, Rose sent the little schemer into a furious rage. What label would that child have then? Elisa bared her teeth in anger, who told her to overstep despite not having the status for it. Rose stood up and said she had greatly enjoyed today's tea party, but she still had to attend a candlelit dinner with the emperor, so she would not accompany them any longer. Before leaving, she even casually said she was going to bear His Majesty's children. As expected, little schemer Elisa couldn't hold back. She stormed out in fury, lifting her skirt as she rushed off. He even has to show off something as ordinary as sharing a meal. I've eaten with His Majesty more times than I can count. It just hadn't been as frequent lately. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. She had to bring down the Empress and drive her out. The thought of His Majesty being together with that Bat Princess made her deeply unhappy. Just then, two workers painting a wall up ahead caught her attention. When she saw the two buckets of paint on the ground, she immediately thought of a good idea. At the same time, Rose had already changed into formal wear. To avoid ending up as a hostage like the former empress had in her previous life, she wanted to use the dinner to prove her worth to the emperor. And her memories of her previous life were her trump card. Just then, a maid delivered a letter saying the emperor wished to see Rose immediately. But they were about to meet at dinner anyway. A sudden letter like this clearly meant someone was trying to cause trouble. Fine, then I'll play along. The flames in her hand burned with a little more ferocity. But when she arrived at the meeting place, there was no one there. Just as she was beginning to feel disappointed, she heard a noise. A milky white liquid was dumped down from above. Rose instinctively raised a hand to shield herself, but her clothes were still stained. Laughter came from above. Elisa and the others mocked her openly. Elisa even praised her own hair-dyeing skills. Rose stared at her coldly, her entire body radiating a chilling aura. And all of it was seen by the Emperor, who was watching from the shadows. He had waited a long time at dinner and still hadn't seen the Empress appear. He thought she was probably in her room, crying by now, and looked down on her a little as he decided to eat first. "Sorry I'm late." Hearing a woman's voice, the Emperor looked over carelessly and was stunned by what he saw. Golden hair, bright and flowing. A red and white gown that showed off her curves beautifully, and a face so beautiful it was impossible to look away. Even the Emperor was left speechless. He unconsciously swallowed. When he remained silent, Rose and Xian were both a little confused. Perhaps because she was too stunning, the Emperor's eyes stayed locked on Rose. When he realized he had been caught staring, this notorious playboy actually looked a little flustered. He grabbed his wine glass and downed it in one gulp. He loosened his tie with one hand, drank a few more cups, and only then asked about the Empress's hair. He had assumed she had dyed it, but it turned out this was Rose's natural color. Her parents had simply deceived her into dyeing it black regularly. They claimed they were afraid someone would frame her because the more golden the hair, the stronger the magic. But in truth, they had only wanted to ruin her. Now, however, there was no need to dye it anymore. Her golden hair was also one way of proving her value to the Emperor. Still, she didn't want to say too much to him, since all of it involved things from her previous life. So she only made up a few vague excuses and flattered the Emperor a little. "I'm very happy, dining with your majesty in my true appearance. I feel like we suit each other better this way." The Emperor looked at her thoughtfully. He was clearly moved, yet still stubbornly said she should not get carried away. There are plenty of useful women in this city. Rose did not get angry. Compared to the others, she believed she was more valuable. The Emperor, however, snapped that she was insolent, his face fierce enough to devour someone. "I've seen countless women like you." Rose toyed with her wine glass and softly said, "If you kill me, you'll lose secrets that could shake the world." When the Emperor didn't believe her, she calmly tossed out 3 words, "the Platinum Fleet." The Emperor's expression changed at once. The Chariot Empire was located in a cold region, so trade was an important means of balancing resources. The Platinum Fleet was one of the Empire's key cargo fleets. But in 1 month, it would be attacked by another country, and its cargo would be completely looted. Not only would Chariot lose a great number of sailors, it would gain nothing from the shipment. Of course, Rose's own homeland had played a role in it as well. Thinking of that made Rose burn with regret. Why had she been so stupid back then? Her original intention had been to strengthen trade between the two countries. She had never expected her father to use such methods, nor had she expected herself to believe his grand-sounding excuses. Having no choice was just a shameless cover for pursuing profit by any means necessary. The Emperor had thought the Empress wanted to talk business with him, but Rose's next words shocked him. "In 1 month, someone will attack the Platinum Fleet. I know the location and even the exact time." Rose was very confident. "I wonder if this information is enough to prove my value?" As for any other powerful intelligence, she had no intention of revealing it for now. Information like that wasn't something to be handed over casually. The Emperor thought she was fairly clever and ordered his secretary to record the detailed information. If the attack truly happened, he would admit that the Empress was not just a freeloader. But if she sent him on a wild goose chase, the consequences would be severe. For the first time, husband and wife reached an understanding, but it drove the 4th mistress, Elisa, mad with anger. The moment he entered, he saw Elisa being helped out in disheveled clothes. Meanwhile, Rose received dead cats for several days in a row. That woman actually had golden hair and dared to bargain with the Emperor. The followers immediately rushed to complain to the Emperor. She immediately ordered that the cats be turned into dishes. Elisa felt humiliated, as if she had been toyed with. She had to settle accounts with the Empress. Jirbin instantly turned cold with irritation. "Who allowed you to speak to me? Do you think you're worthy?" But when she sat down for lunch, she suddenly discovered that the food had been poisoned. Rose, meanwhile, was also thinking of dealing with her. Originally, she had intended to lie low until the Platinum Fleet incident and avoid causing trouble. Everyone was so frightened they began trembling, and Jirbin soon learned from his subordinates what had just happened. Since she didn't know which mistress had done it, Rose simply gathered all the maids and attendants together. But before a letter from her family could even reach her hands, it was torn to pieces. He then strode off aggressively to settle the matter with Rose. She ordered them all to eat the food. Though Rose had planned to tear it up herself anyway, she still felt irritated. You really do know how to cause trouble. You actually slit Elisa's dress. Everyone was baffled, but they still obediently put the food in their mouths. Only the head maid did not take a single bite. The prime suspect was, of course, Elisa. When will I get to see the fourth mistress? A mere official consort dared to attack one of the emperor's mistresses. Only then did Rose smile and order everyone to spit the food out. Xin immediately produced an invitation. The Jinduke's family was hosting a grand birthday banquet over the weekend, and all the imperial mistresses would attend. Elisa was the daughter of a count's house from the neighboring Yulain kingdom, a family that controlled 70% of its trade. The food is poisoned. Drink some water and rinse your mouths. Everyone was so frightened that they immediately gagged themselves and vomited. Rose took the invitation and looked at it. Relations between the two countries had always been poor. Rose, however, walked straight toward the head maid. How could she let such an opportunity pass? The previous emperor had been a tyrant and had even threatened to wipe out Yulain and accused her of being the culprit. Inform the fourth mistress that I will attend as well. Because of that, Yulain's king had refused friendly ties with Jirbin. The head maid went pale with fright. I like to see what tricks a mere fourth mistress can pull. Jirbin could only maintain trade through the count's family. How had Rose discovered the poison? The person who gave it to her had clearly said it was a deadly toxin. Her mood was unpleasant, so she thought of going to the conservatory to look at flowers and clear her mind. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Rose had no patience for nonsense. So she met a cool and quiet young woman who looked like the kind of person easy to bully. If trade with the Count's house is severed over this matter, then we lose our connection with Yulain as well. Can you take responsibility for that? She grabbed the food and stuffed it directly into the maid's mouth. The head maid collapsed unconscious on the spot and was carried out. Only after asking did Rose learn she was the emperor's third mistress. Perhaps she had been bullied too, which was why she was alone here. But Rose wasn't frightened at all. She even patted her chest and assured him, judging by the toxicity, it probably would not kill. Still, Rose reminded herself to be cautious. Your Majesty won't need her anymore now. The person behind it had only wanted to make her suffer. In her previous life, when her eyes had been destroyed, she had never known whether this woman had taken part. Because I am by your side. What they did not know was that when she was little, her parents had often trained her by making her ingest poison. Perhaps she could use the third mistress to gather information about the others. So she invited her to share afternoon tea. Just then, a subordinate had a physician brought in to treat Rose's wound, but Jirbin knocked over the medicine box with one slap. They called it building resistance, but in truth, they were using her to test poison for her younger siblings. It turned out that among the 6 mistresses, the most powerful was not the fourth mistress. Insolence. Do you want to be punished? You still have no value yet. That was why she could detect poison so easily. It was the 6th mistress, Camilla. But Rose couldn't help laughing. Rose remembered a maid once saying that the head maid had close ties with the 4th and 6th mistresses. Before Rose had arrived, the one most likely to become official consort had been Camilla. She dipped a finger into the blood from her wound from that. She concluded that the mastermind was the 6th mistress. The emperor treated all the others similarly, but he treated Camilla differently, and gently smeared it across Jirbin's lips. At the same time, the tyrant heard that Rose had been poisoned, because she could help the emperor handle many minor problems. Even the 4th mistress listened to her. You'll acknowledge my value very soon. Your Majesty only needs to wait for the right moment. He also learned that she had personally identified the culprit as the head maid and forced the poison into the maid herself. Yet for now, Camilla had made no move at all. That made Rose uneasy. Jirbin was so thoroughly teased by her that his heart raced and his face flushed. The tyrant was instantly full of admiration for Rose and directly ordered. The 3rd mistress, however, was an exception. She had always been the one bullied. After returning, even while handling official matters, he kept getting distracted. That a physician be summoned to treat her. Everyone who heard this was dumbfounded. She was the small stroke of luck Rose had encountered in her dark days. And Rose had not been boasting. Based on her memories from her previous life, the cold and heartless emperor actually cared about someone. In her previous life, Rose had spent 10 years in Chariot's prison. The king of Yulain would soon die. Very soon, the court physician arrived to examine Rose. The emperor's mistresses had humiliated her constantly. It was said that he died while slipping out to meet a mistress in secret. He even used calming magic. But there had been one person who had actually cried and said she wished to atone on behalf of the others. The scandal would cause a huge uproar and even make the newspapers. To help her recover quickly, she had used magic to pray for Rose. If Rose used this matter well, smiling warmly, the physician said, hoping Rose would find salvation soon. She had even brought wine, wanting to ease her pain. She could handle diplomacy between the two countries and become more useful than Elisa. Only the Empress is someone His Majesty keeps in his thoughts. But Rose had knocked it over. So Rose immediately asked to see Jirbinyu or our nation's treasure, because she had assumed it must be poisoned. Yet later, she had licked a drop of the spilled wine from the floor and requested permission to travel outside the palace. Even if it were only a mild cold, His Majesty would still have me come treat you. That proved it wasn't poison at all. Unexpectedly, Jirbin insisted on accompanying her. The servants were even more terrified after hearing that. After her eyes had been ruined, all Rose had remembered was that gentle, timid voice. He even canceled all his official engagements. They had failed to notice the head made poisoning the food, and the Empress was now so favored. So when she met the third mistress now, she felt an odd sense of familiarity. In an instant, the entire palace was in an uproar. With a single word from her, all their families could be killed. I really shouldn't be living in this city. This was a honeymoon trip for newlyweds, wasn't it? But to their surprise, Rose not only refrained from punishing them, it was exactly the same voice and tone as the person from the prison. So was you. The emperor had never gone out with any woman before. Her Majesty the Empress was truly favored. She gave each of them a bag of gold coins. Rose wanted to invite her to her own tea party. When Elisa heard the news, she exploded with anger all over again. She even ordered treatment for them as compensation for having had them test the poisoned food. But before that, she needed to deal with a few eyesores. At the Duke's birthday banquet, the Empress's golden hair became the hottest topic. At first, Rose had thought the two of them would merely travel together. The servants were immediately overcome with gratitude. Her Majesty the Empress was truly kind-hearted. Everyone knew the common truth that the closer one's hair color was to gold or silver, the stronger the magical power. But Jirbin forcefully insisted that they eat together and even sleep in the same room. Now the sick people and their families could be saved too. But more than that, they wanted to watch the Empress and the mistresses tear into each other. Yet every time, Xian was still at Rose's side. Jirbin instantly became displeased. Before, they had only mistreated the Empress because the head maid had misled them. Amid the noise, Rose appeared in a lace-trimmed purple gown. So beautiful, worthy of the official consort indeed. That man is always by your side, and you even brought him from your homeland. From now on, they would serve the Empress properly. Only then would they have a better future. Praise rose endlessly around her, but some people were not pleased. Rose laughed. Are you jealous? Rose saw it all and revealed a satisfied smile. After all, this was imperial strategy. Elisa was already itching to steal the spotlight, so you lied to all of us. Jirbin immediately became embarrassed and angry. Still stubborn, he said, Are you drunk? Very soon, the sixth mistress sent word and invited the Empress to dinner. You really went to great lengths just to outshine the imperial mistresses, didn't you? She was implying that the Empress was no different from them. Rose didn't argue with him. She simply got up and headed for the door. After receiving the invitation, Rose suddenly asked Xian, You know how to sew, don't you? Unexpectedly, Rose didn't take the bait. Jirbin instantly pulled her onto the bed, but the tyrant's mistresses kept provoking her again and again. She even shyly thanked Elisa for the compliment, leaving the crowd murmuring and Elisa looking embarrassed. You don't need to work so hard. You don't need to prove your value either. They even sneered that the witch had strange tastes. Then two mistresses nearby quietly started discussing something. As long as you bear my child, your place as Empress will be secure, and threatened to kill her attendant as a warning to others. The next second, one of them deliberately stuck out a foot. Rose lurched forward and nearly fell flat on her face. But Rose's mind was filled only with revenge. They even poured red wine over her head. Rose directly shoved the woman into the pond. Looking at their smug expressions, Rose recognized them. They had been there at the last tea party too. She immediately shoved the tyrant away and haughtily declared, "We'll talk when I'm in the mood." Then she mocked her as a filthy drowned rat. A cold gleam flashed through Rose's eyes. The smile on her lips was not quite a smile at all. Then she changed clothes and slipped out into the night. That very day, the tyrant received an invitation letter from King Jerome of Elaine. One look, and it was obvious those little schemers were about to suffer. The tyrant was left completely stunned. After all that, she hadn't fallen for him at all. Rose's value was finally proven. She had now become the bridge of diplomacy between the two nations. Just then, Duke Q and his wife happened to appear. Rose immediately put on a bright smile. Meanwhile, Rose rode away in a carriage. She had not gone far before she was forced to stop. Tyrant Emperor Jirbin immediately took her with him to attend the state banquet and smoothly switched into social mode. Bandits were blocking the road, robbing travelers, and even planning to kill to silence witnesses. But before departing, he sternly declared that Rose was not allowed to bring XN. People who admired the Empress kept coming over to chat, all praising her hair without end. Rose immediately rushed forward in excitement and used powerful fire magic. After arriving at the royal palace of Elaine, getting attention just because of hair color. What's so special about that? She burned all the bandits to ashes. The more she killed, the more exhilarated she became. King Jerome came to greet them with his queen. The mistress who had tricked her earlier muttered bitterly, then smiled and began plotting something else with the person beside her. Because the hatred in her heart ran too deep. Because he feared Rose would expose his secret meeting with a mistress, Jerome acted extremely friendly. "So, this is where you are." Rose covered her mouth with a smile. At that moment, her magic was even stronger than it had been on the battlefield in her previous life. But the nobles were clearly dissatisfied. "I wanted to come have a nice little chat with you." After that, Rose walked toward a lavish carriage. They pointed at Jirbin and whispered openly, even speaking in foul, insulting language. The next moment, her gaze shifted. Based on her memories of her previous life, she immediately recognized the owner. How can the sacred palace of Elaine? The mistress who had tripped her let out a pig-like scream. It was Jerome, the king of Elaine. Allow people like them to enter? Under the horrified eyes of the other two, Rose used her high heel to grind hard onto the woman's instep until it was red and swollen. The person in his arms was his little lover. In her previous life, the two had been torn apart here and killed by bandits. The Empress is that low-born bat princess, and beside her is the infamous tyrant emperor. The victim's mouth was clamped shut, while the heel kept twisting against her foot. The pain was unbearable. The queen had been both grief-stricken and furious. When Rose called out his identity, the king still refused to admit it and wanted to keep hiding the truth. His Majesty must have lost his mind to invite such vermin. "I'm worried Elaine will suffer disaster because of it. What do you think you're doing?" Elisa finally exploded. Rose threatened him mercilessly. Relations between the two countries had always been poor. Rose looked at her with contempt. "I'm just helping her with a little foot care. If Her Majesty the Queen finds out that the jewel she never got from you at 18 was stolen by this little lover instead, their hatred for Jirbin was only natural." Jirbin's expression remained calm. He was already used to such slander. Then she rose gracefully. "What do you think will happen? We're both royals. I can't exactly hide it from the queen, can I?" After all, his evil reputation had spread far and wide. No matter how many tricks you use or how many followers you have, you still aren't worth His Majesty looking back at you. The king was so frightened that he dropped to his knees and begged her not to tell anyone. The previous emperor had died at his hands. Though to be fair, the previous emperor had hardly been a good man either. Those words struck Elisa right in the lungs. Rose immediately suggested with a fake smile, "Then why don't we sign an agreement right now?" He bullied weaker nations. In a fit of rage, she hurled the wine glass in her hand. The king had no choice but to agree, and tried to dominate the continent. Crash! A shard of glass grazed Rose's cheek. Soon, Rose returned to the inn. Jirbin had been reading documents while waiting bitterly for her to come back. After that incident, Jirbin became known as the child of the devil. The followers panicked, but Elisa kept shouting. Clearly, not teaching her a lesson wasn't an option. The moment he saw her, his face was full of resentment. The nobles mocked him endlessly. Rose picked up a table knife. The followers urged Elisa to run. Was taking a walk more important than spending the night with me? They act human, but their methods are cruel, just like his imperial father. But with one hand on her hip, Elisa stubbornly refused to believe Rose would dare. Rose directly handed him the agreement instead. The only thing he has worth mentioning is his magic. His Majesty favors me most. If you dare touch even a hair on my head, I happened to run into the king of Yulain and chatted with him a little. Only when all the people in his country starve to death will we be satisfied. Rip. With one slash, her gown was cut into something scandalously revealing. He not only wants to establish trade, he also wants to maintain friendly relations with Chariot. Faced with the Empress's triumphant provocation, this is the proof. Elisa could no longer keep up her bravado. How familiar this scene was. Jirbin was utterly stunned. The agreement was indeed in Jerome's own handwriting. This should have been impossible. Wasn't this exactly how Rose had been humiliated in her previous life? Only now it was Elisa's turn. King Jerome of Yulain had despised Chariot. Just 2 months earlier, he had clearly refused any trade relations. Elisa immediately crouched down, clutching her chest. But Rose had no desire to explain in detail. She didn't dare move at all, or she'd end up running around practically naked. She climbed onto him and pressed him down directly. I'm in a very good mood right now. Rose looked down at her with scorn, as if she were watching a clown. The crowd mocked Elisa mercilessly. Let's spend the night together. Jirbin instantly threw everything else out of his mind and kissed her deeply. A mere mistress dared lay hands on Her Majesty the Empress? In the end, she only brought disaster on herself. She deserved it. The next day, Jirbin gave the order to forcibly send Elisa back to Yulain. And all of this was seen by the 6th mistress, Camilla. The emperor, worried, had followed after them. He even said, "I don't need you anymore." Elisa cried and made a huge scene. His heart was so excited it felt ready to leap from his chest. For the first time, she found the empress rather interesting. Meanwhile, but she never even got to see Jirbin before she was thrown out. At that moment, all Jirbin could think about was the warm scene of the night he had spent with Rose. Rose could not hold it in any longer. With a dark, terrifying look on her face, she glared at them. Say that again. The princes and nobles burst into laughter and continued their filthy insults and mockery. Rose directly used fire magic and burned the man who had spoken out of turn into blackened charcoal. In an instant, the entire hall fell silent. Jirbin stood there in shock. Whenever something like this had happened before, his mistresses would only say they felt sorry for him or tell him not to mind it, saying these people were all foul-mouthed anyway. Or they would tremble in fear, not knowing how to respond. Some even pretended not to hear. This was the first time anyone had stepped forward and so fiercely defended him. It took Jirbin a long while to react, yet he was certain she was not trying to flatter him. Then Rose suddenly laughed. "I'm only doing what a wife should do. I'll take responsibility for it. You needn't worry. I'm used to stepping forward for others. No one is allowed to slander my husband." After all, in her previous life, Jirbin had pitied her and once reached out a hand to help her. This was a small repayment. Rose turned to the crowd and said viciously, "I should cut out all your tongues and burn you to ashes." The nobles trembled in terror and dropped to their knees with a thud. They begged her to spare them for the sake of relations between the two nations and not wipe them out entirely. The tyrant emperor laughed in delight. It was the first time anyone had willingly defended him. Jirbin became even more interested in this empress, whose reputation had always been terrible. As for the disturbance, the king of Yulain declared that the guests had been insulted and sentenced all the offenders to death. With Rose's ruthless display as a warning, relations between Yulain and Chariot improved with astonishing speed. Very soon, the two nations became friendly allies. The news spread everywhere. The Empress had managed to resolve the diplomatic deadlock between the two countries without relying on her family at all. No wonder she had been able to send the 4th imperial mistress back to her homeland. That mistress, no, that concubine, couldn't even compare to the Empress's heel. Everyone became Rose's admirers. They gathered around her with worshipful eyes, constantly fussing over her. No one dared help the 6th imperial mistress deliver dead cats anymore. But Rose held grudges. She ordered dead rats to be sent to the 6th imperial mistress every single day. The 6th imperial mistress was practically exploding with rage, smashing things in her room. "That bitch again. On the visit to Yulain, she injured one of their dukes. That was obviously a serious crime. Why didn't His Majesty punish her? By precedent, she should have been punished for obstructing negotiations. Even if she has a little value, that shouldn't change anything. Why didn't His Majesty kill her instead? Why did he forgive her? The sixth imperial mistress smashed and struck everything in sight. Does His Majesty really like her? She got to spend the night with him so easily. And I haven't even touched one of His Majesty's fingers. Her face twisted with hatred. She wanted to kill Rose, but there were too many eyes and ears around the Empress. She could not leave any evidence behind and be sent back home in disgrace like that fool, the fourth imperial mistress. So the sixth imperial mistress turned her attention to Rose's attendant. The man's name was Shin. He was the sixth son of Viscount Pennyworth of the Berry Kingdom. Because his family was in financial trouble, he had been sold to the palace as a servant. He was quiet, barely socialized with anyone, and had nothing particularly special about him. No one knew why the Bat Princess had taken a liking to him and brought him along when she married. Looking at Shin's youthful, handsome face, the sixth imperial mistress sneered that the two of them must be having an affair. A strange smile spread across her lips. So the dead cats didn't teach you a lesson, huh? Then I'll start with your pretty boy. Little did she know, Rose had brought Shin with her only because in her previous life, he had once saved her. She only wanted to repay him. The two of them had barely exchanged a few words. Shin was skilled at cooking and excellent at sewing, and Rose liked him very much. One day, Shin wanted to make tea, but he was gone for a long time. Suddenly, a maid came running in a panic to report that Shin had been severely injured and carried away. At the same time, the culprit, the sixth imperial mistress, was admiring the blood all over her own face and smiling smugly. When Rose learned of it, she immediately summoned the best physicians to treat him, but they were only able to save his life. The wound was too deep. The horrifying scar on his face could not be removed. This was the sixth imperial mistress's warning to Rose. Rose was so furious she nearly went mad. The servants trembled in fear, afraid that if they stayed by the Empress's side, one day they might end up like Shin. Rose gently touched Shin's face and soothed him. You're still handsome. Even if your face is injured, you're still handsome. I like it. Only then did Shin let out a sigh of relief. He even remembered he still had to make tea for his mistress. Rose told him to rest well, then stormed off toward the sixth imperial mistress's palace. At the same time, the sixth imperial mistress was still savoring the thrill of tearing the corner of Shin's mouth. He's just a pretty boy. Now that he's become a monster, the Empress won't go this far for him. But the next second, the doors were blown open with a roar of flame. Rose burst in, wreathed in fire and radiating murderous intent. The sixth imperial mistress jumped in fright, but quickly regained herself. Secure in her status, she began speaking with sarcastic sweetness. Why, isn't this Her Majesty the Empress? I heard your attendant was hurt. I am deeply sorry. It's all because his master is stupid that he ended up as damaged goods. Aren't you favored? His Majesty the Emperor's healing power is extraordinary. He could heal him in an instant. But the Emperor never heals others, much less a mere servant. If you've got the ability, go beg the Emperor. But Rose seemed not to hear a word. She advanced step by step with a cold, sharp gaze. Now the sixth imperial mistress was truly afraid. Don't come any closer. I have the purest chariot blood. His Majesty cherishes me most. If you dare lay a finger on me, you'll be thrown out at once. But Rose was not afraid in the slightest. She grabbed the woman's head and flames flared at her fingertips. In an instant, the sixth imperial mistress's hair caught fire. She shrieked in agony. Rose seized her face and made her taste the pain of disfigurement too. The guards immediately shouted and rushed forward. Rose recognized them at a glance. They were the same executioners who had gouged out her eyes during the ritual in her previous life. Old hatred and new surged up together. Rose flung out a massive fireball with a wave of her hand, burning those executioners into blackened corpses. Then she walked up to the sixth imperial mistress. Looking at the woman's burned face, she suddenly remembered the mockery from her previous life. Oh my, how disgusting. Trash like you dare refuse? His Majesty really doesn't know what's good for him. Rose smiled sweetly and said, Oh my, how disgusting. Filthier than a rat in the street. This time, it's your turn. As she spoke, another fireball appeared in Rose's hand. The sixth imperial mistress burst into tears and terror. At the critical moment, the Emperor suddenly appeared. Looking at his disfigured mistress and the attendants burned to charcoal, he said coldly, What nerve? What do you think you're doing? Rose only smiled and said this was a wife's jealousy. The emperor burst out laughing. Not only did he not punish her, he even called her cute. After this, the palace maids all began currying favor with her. Some influential factions also began showing goodwill, and several of them were quite useful. Even her father from her homeland sent her a letter, shamelessly trying to mend relations. Rose burned the letter without even reading it. Sooner or later, she would send them all to hell. Rose wanted to go chat with Sasha in the garden, but Sasha had heard the servants gossiping that the Empress's attendant had been injured by the 6th Imperial Mistress and was still too badly hurt to leave his room. So Sasha hurried to the infirmary to visit him. There she saw that the scar on Shin's face was severe and worried he would be psychologically scarred and leave in the future. But Shin only wanted to keep working for Rose. After all, the Empress had avenged him and offended the powers behind the 6th Imperial Mistress because of him. He only worried that his ugly appearance meant he could no longer serve the royal family. If Rose wanted to be worthy of His Majesty the Emperor, she could not be dragged down by a stain like him. But Sasha told him not to worry. The Empress treated even someone as insignificant as him so kindly, so there was no way she would make Shin leave over such a small matter. Shin fell a little speechless. It seems Sasha had misunderstood the Empress. Rose had always been used by the royal family back in Buri, treated as nothing more than a princess meant to be traded as a wife. Now, she had risen through her own strength. She was absolutely not some soft-hearted, gentle person, but Shin still wanted to remain by her side. Sasha gasped. "Don't tell me you have improper feelings for the Empress?" Shin was deeply grateful for the Empress protecting him, but he was only a servant. He simply wanted to serve her well. Rose heard all of this from outside the door. She had originally come to find Sasha for a chat, but unexpectedly heard that conversation instead, leaving her somewhat disappointed. Even so, her first concern was still Shin's condition. When she heard from the doctor that other than the scar, there was no major problem, she invited Shin to return and continue working. To her, the scar did not matter. As long as he could still eat, that was enough. Rose personally removed his bandages. She fed Shin with her own hands and only relaxed after seeing that eating was unaffected. The scar was severe, but the Emperor's healing magic could cure it in an instant. The problem was that the tyrant would never casually help heal a servant. So Rose decided she would first get a little closer to the tyrant. Besides, even with the scar, Shin still looked handsome. In her previous life, Rose had led troops on the battlefield, so she was already used to scars. Sasha, feeling rather out of place beside them, hurriedly invited them to the spring festival. It was an important celebration to the common people, with lots of delicious food. Rose felt a little ashamed. She had never attended any festival before. Still, she had heard of this festival in her previous life. Something had happened there that became a huge scandal and even made the papers. Though staying in the palace would be safer, if she wanted to establish herself, she had to take the initiative. So Rose decided to attend with Shin. At the same time, the tyrant received a formal letter of protest. The 6th Imperial Mistress's father, the Duke, had pressured other nobles and united them in petitioning the Emperor, threatening that if he did not punish the Empress, they would sever ties with him. The Emperor ignored them completely. This was merely the Empress's way of being jealous. Besides, the 6th Imperial Mistress had injured the Empress's attendant first. The Empress had only gone to settle the score. But the moment he finished speaking, the tyrant frowned. The Empress seemed very good to that attendant. Instantly, he grew jealous. Unaware of that, Rose had already taken Shin out to browse the market. Everyone mistook them for a young couple. Rose was grateful that the Emperor had allowed her to leave the palace, but sending this many guards along was a bit excessive. They were probably there to monitor her, but Rose only wanted to enjoy the food. This was her first time attending a festival. Back in her homeland, she had always envied her younger brother and sister, who happily went to festivals all the time, while her parents claimed the festivals were too crowded and dangerous, and left Rose at home to deal with endless work. Now she could finally go out and enjoy herself as she pleased. Rose generously told the guards to go have fun as well, and she herself tasted every kind of food she could find. She wasn't worried about being poisoned either. In her previous life, she had often tested food for her younger siblings, so her body had long developed resistance to poisons. Just then she saw someone selling puppies. The owner said dogs could protect their masters. Rose was strong enough to protect herself, but she worried someone might make another deadly move against Shin. Getting him 2 guard dogs wouldn't be bad. During the war in her previous life, she had seen armies frequently use large hounds. After all, dogs were less likely than people to betray you. At that moment, a pack of vicious dogs broke free from their cages and charged ferociously at the pedestrians. The guards immediately moved to protect Rose and prepare to shoot the dogs, but the owner cried out that they were expensive and must not be shot. They had originally been meant to be sold to nobles as guard dogs, but had been returned for being too vicious. They were now supposed to be sold to the military to guard powder stores. Who would have thought this would happen? Rose smiled and calmly walked up to the vicious dogs. With a wave of her hand, she released fire magic. In her previous life, she had seen countless times on the battlefield how large dogs were trained. Rose surrounded the vicious dogs with flames and threatened them to choose obedience or becoming charcoal. Sure enough, the dogs all trembled in fear and obediently followed Rose's commands. Only then did she withdraw her magic. She bought all of the dogs. Hidden in the shadows, a man smashed his fist in anger. Useless mutts. They got caught so quickly. He hadn't even had time to arrange all the gunpowder yet. But it didn't matter. The festival was crowded. Lighting it anywhere would cause massive chaos. The moment he was about to ignite the powder, Rose suddenly appeared behind him, setting a fire in a crowded marketplace. Quite bold of you. The man turned pale in shock. He had hidden his movements so carefully. How had this woman known? Rose kicked him flying, and the guards rushed in to pin him down. Because Rose had heard about this incident in her previous life, she knew it had been a terrorist attack. A fire had broken out on the main street during the spring festival, and because the crowd had not been able to escape in time, many people had died. Thanks to Rose's timely action, the tragedy was successfully prevented. Even then, the man kept barking madly. It's all that stupid emperor's fault, letting foreign pigs and dogs become his lovers, and making the bat princess the empress. A woman like that isn't fit to be empress. The 6th imperial mistress's ducal house is the true pure blood of Chariot. Rose was almost amused by his stupidity. It was nothing new for Chariot to take women from other nations as empresses. Even modern emperors had married women from other countries. Besides, Rose herself had only been sent over by Barry as a hostage. The man still shouted, "I'm going to destroy the emperor's regime and spread the spark of revolution." Rose's eyes turned cold at once. Since he liked playing so much, she would indulge him properly. With a backhanded motion, Rose unleashed fire magic, and in an instant the man's body was engulfed in roaring flames. She made him experience the flames of revolution for himself. In the end, thanks to Rose's timely intervention, the fire was never started. Soon the news reached the tyrant emperor's ears. The investigation showed that the empress had no dealings with the man. It had been an isolated act on his part. The tyrant had already known it was not Rose's doing. She disdained terrorism. However, Rose had burned the criminal badly, and he would need treatment before he could be punished. As for Rose, after returning from the festival, she only sent the emperor a pitiful little bouquet of flowers. Even Sasha got something, but what Rose gave Shin was 2 dogs. She even trained the vicious dogs for him personally. Seeing this, Shin's expression darkened. He thought the 2 dogs were his replacements. Rose burst out laughing. She had done it only to protect him. She even gave Shin the right to name the dogs. But Shin was terribly bad at naming things, choosing silly cute names like Woof Woof and Fluffy. In the end, Rose named them herself, directly using the names of her younger sister Nicola and her younger brother Eli. At that moment, the tyrant emperor summoned her. Rose had thought it was about the festival fire. Unexpectedly, the tyrant's first words were that she should dismiss Shin. He said he could give Shin a promotion, wealth, and even a house, but he could not allow him to remain by Rose's side. Rose demanded a reason. The tyrant was too embarrassed to admit he was jealous, so he could only speak against his heart and say Shin's scar was ugly and unsuitable for someone serving at the empress's side. It was embarrassing even to hear. He could heal the scar with a flick of his finger, yet he was using it as an excuse. Of course, Rose strongly objected. Shin had to remain her personal attendant, and besides, the scar was the sin of the 6th imperial mistress. Why should Shin bear the consequences? If the emperor disliked the scar, then Rose would simply put a dog muzzle on Shin to cover it. After all, she was a bad woman, and Shin, this vicious hound, suited her perfectly. The tyrant burst out laughing. This woman was utterly insane. With his mood improved, he let the matter drop for the time being. There were 4 days left until the Platinum Fleet set sail. Rose hurried to finish training the 2 dogs, naming them Chi-Chi and Cece. Using the dog training techniques she had learned on the battlefield in her previous life, she trained them daily in the garden. She was preparing to one day bring them along to bite her enemies. In 4 days, she would personally prove her worth. Rose refused to merely tell him the exact location of the Platinum Fleet. She insisted on boarding in person to direct matters. But the tyrant would not listen at all. His attention was completely fixed on the fact that the Empress was training dogs for Shin. He could not stand the thought of Rose and Shin being alone in the courtyard, so he immediately forbade the Empress from training dogs there. Instead, he ordered her to do it in front of his own window. Even his attendants were stunned, speechless. His Majesty had always cared greatly about the view outside his window. He never even allowed servants to pass in front of it. Then the tyrant folded his arms, tilted his head in a strangely proud way, and declared that he would also board the ship. 4 days later, Rose stood ready at the harbor. The tyrant followed her aboard. He said viciously that if she dared lie to him, he would make her wish she were dead. But his hand was much more honest, gently stroking Rose's cheek. Rose only felt that something was wrong with him. A few days earlier, he had suddenly forbidden her from training in the garden. Rose had thought she had done something wrong. She had never imagined he only wanted her to move to a prettier place right beneath his window. Rose assumed he was monitoring her. Perhaps today, he even intended to get rid of her. But today, Rose would prove her worth. Sure enough, halfway through the voyage, the Platinum ship was suddenly attacked. Even after hearing it belonged to the Chariot Empire, the pirates did not retreat in the slightest. They even ordered everyone killed. Then an officer from the kingdom of Capricer stepped onto the pirate ship and arrogantly declared that with the priceless cargo aboard the Platinum ship, Capricer would have ample military funds, while the Chariot Empire would no longer remain powerful. Even the tyrant emperor would be helpless. Capricer would become the #1 power on the continent. He also ordered that the Platinum ship be sunk to the bottom of the sea so no one could trace any evidence. But at that very moment, a giant warship suddenly appeared. Standing on it were none other than the tyrant Jirbin and Rose. Jirbin saw everything clearly from where he stood. His face instantly darkened with fury. Everything was exactly as Rose had said. Jirbin's mind churned. It was difficult to judge positions accurately at sea. How had Rose managed to be this precise? The pirates discovered the Imperial warship, and Jirbin's vessel opened fire. The soldiers on the other side wanted to return fire, but there were too many precious goods on the Platinum ship, so they hesitated. At that moment, Rose suddenly let out a contemptuous laugh. She loosened her cloak. I haven't shown all my value yet. I've been waiting for today. Use your own eyes to remember every moment. With that, she jumped onto a small boat and charged alone toward the Platinum ship. Everyone feared something would happen to her and anxiously wanted to go after her in support. But Jirbin casually stopped them, even saying that if she died, then she died. Less trouble than throwing her into the sea later. Hearing that, Shin's eyes darkened at once. But the vice commander understood very well. The Empress's intelligence had been completely accurate. There was no way His Majesty would kill the Empress. And the pleasure in his smile made it obvious. He was convinced she would not lose. He would do as Rose had said, and with his own eyes remember every one of Rose's movements and expressions. By then, Rose had already leapt onto the Platinum ship. The pirates immediately surrounded her, but Rose was not afraid in the least. Compared with fighting the Chariot army in her previous life, these pirates were nothing more than petty vermin. Rose unleashed her fire without restraint, turning the pirates into human torches. Under her precise control, the flames did not damage the cargo in the slightest. They targeted only the pirates. She used them as a medium to prove her worth, and with each battle she fought, she grew stronger and stronger. The pirates abandoned the cargo and fled back to their own ship. Rose directly punched through that officer's chest. Enraged and humiliated, the pirate ship opened fire on them. Even Rose was blown away by the explosion. Fortunately, the woman was a good swimmer and happened to find a piece of wood to cling to, or she would definitely have died this time. Still, she was lucky. Though the enemy ship had sunk, the body of the key figure behind the attack was still on the Platinum ship. Through this dangerous battle, she had successfully proven her value. In her exhausted eyes, scenes from the past surfaced. Her parents had once smiled and called her their pride. Even her brother and sister had always had their wishes granted. But all of it had been an illusion. The human heart was far more terrifying than one could imagine. When you had value, you were treasured. When you did not, you became a scapegoat. So in this life, she had worked hard to prove herself, only to create a chance to make her family regret everything. When the search ship found Rose, the soldiers carried her aboard. But Rose lay motionless on the deck. Everyone panicked. The commander stepped forward first to heal her, yet nothing worked even after a long while. Suddenly, a large hand landed on his shoulder. He spun around, about to flare up, but discovered it was the Emperor, looking at his wife lying there with a deathly pale face. He remembered that small body always seeming to stand in front of him. Thinking of that, the Emperor strode forward, breaking his rule of never treating anyone. He began to heal her. Soon enough, you'll admit that I'm the woman you need most. The Emperor was drenched in sweat. It was as if Rose had been right. Her wounds healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The woman slowly opened her eyes. When she saw the person beside her, her face filled with shock. Everyone else was equally stunned. This was the first time the ice-cold Emperor had ever treated someone. But after that incident, the Empress had not seen the Emperor for a whole day. She held her head in frustration. Back then, she should have cut the knot cleanly. Just then, the door opened. An attendant of the Emperor walked in. Pardon the disturbance. I'm here on His Majesty's behalf to inquire after your health. The third Imperial Mistress followed, right behind him. Rose had run into these people in the corridor earlier. With how aggressive they looked, anyone would think they had come to start a fight. But the moment they entered, they were stunned by what they saw. Bright, fresh flowers and handsome puppies. It was like a dream room. Did His Majesty send all this to you? You're so favored it's enviable. A strange look flashed through Rose's eyes. She had assumed she would be punished for acting on her own, yet instead she had been rewarded. Once you took someone's gifts, it became harder to speak freely. So these were hush money. She really should not have expected too much. The third Imperial Mistress excitedly brought up that today was the day the sixth Imperial Mistress would return to the ducal house. The moment she finished speaking, the sixth Imperial Mistress barged in. Even with gauze wrapped around her face, it could not hide her anger. What kind of witchcraft did you use, you little fox? His Majesty actually healed you himself. The dogs let out low growls, which only made the sixth Imperial Mistress even angrier. She shouted wildly inside the palace, completely losing the bearing of a noble young lady. Even as the soldiers dragged her away, she still spat out a threat. Just you wait. Duke Bazarov won't let you off. As the woman was hauled away, Rose's lips curled upward as she bid her a final farewell. Back at her desk, Rose thought about the name Bazarov that the sixth Imperial Mistress had mentioned. She had heard it before in her previous life. After Nicola became Empress, she had once written a letter saying she had attended a party at the Bazarov house, but had had a very unpleasant time there. Some sort of small accident had happened. Rose was deep in thought when a maid suddenly delivered a letter. It was from the Bazarov family, inviting the Empress to a grand masquerade ball. But compared with the banquet in her previous life, the timing seemed to have been moved up by several months. This only strengthened Rose's resolve to investigate. She had to learn exactly what kind of person Bazarov was. From the records, she learned that he not only knew how to manage estates well, but also possessed exceptional medical skill, enough to be considered a giant in medicine. Apart from that, the information seemed useless. It made Rose drowsy. And suddenly her eyes lit up, and with a faint smile, she closed the book. It seemed this place was not so clean either. It was time to clean house. The Emperor sat alone, deep in thought. He remembered his childhood. The reason his magic was so powerful was not only his pure bloodline, but also brutal training. Those hellish experiences were impossible to forget, and it was exactly because of them that his magic had become so strong. But from what he had observed that day, if they spoke only of magical power, that woman seemed even stronger than he, the Emperor, was. He could hardly imagine what Rose had been through in the past. Thinking of this, he could not stop the corners of his mouth from rising. The Emperor had to admit it. He had already been captivated by that woman's charm. That evening, Rose was a little surprised. Not only had the man not punished her, he had even invited her to dinner. There was even food on the table, far more lavish than usual. Then the Emperor took the initiative to bring up the attack on the Platinum Fleet. With the officer caught red-handed, it was inevitable that the kingdom of Capricer would be targeted by the Chariot Empire. Although their king claimed it had all been the officer acting alone, they still ended up paying an enormous indemnity and ceding 1/3 of their territory. This operation had proven Rose's value. But the Emperor wanted to know how she had learned of it. At his question, Rose's pupils contracted. She could only improvise a lie. She said that while she had been in her homeland of Berry, she had once received a plea for help from the Count of Capricer. But that had been a long time ago, and even if she had helped, no evidence could be found now. This incident still could not completely rule out Barry's involvement. If the emperor wished to investigate and judge it, she did not fear it at all, because she was now one of Chariot's own. The man paused at her words, though the suspicion in his heart had not completely vanished. Rose took the initiative and said that she had once been one of Barry's core figures, so she still had some intelligence in hand. If His Majesty wished, she could, of course, share it. Looking at this clever woman, the emperor could not understand why Barry had cast her aside and even called her the Bat Princess. Outsiders said she had brought ruin to nations and chaos to the court, since her family had treated her like livestock. Why had this woman voluntarily dyed her hair and hidden her vast magical power? Rose found the question amusing and laughed that she had only now, at her age, finally seen the truth clearly. She had obviously done things that benefited both country and people, yet she had been made a scapegoat, forced to carry all the crimes committed by the royal clan. Of course, she would not continue swallowing such injustice. She would never let those dogs off, being used because of great power. This reminded the emperor of his own past. That terrifying, devilish training was something he could never forget for the rest of his life. This time, I will reward you. Speak, what do you want? Ask for anything. The people nearby were a little shocked and could not help wondering whether this was truly the same emperor as before. Of course, the man was no fool. You want to know how great Rose's ambition was? Did she want a city? Did she want all the mistresses sent home? If it was none of those things, could it be that she wanted to be emperor herself? But ordinary, worldly things did not interest the woman. She let out a soft laugh and said bluntly, I want the world, the kind I possess together with you. As empress, I will devote everything to you and let no one hinder you. I will turn to ashes anything that tries to stain you. I will bloom for you alone. So all I need is for you to acknowledge that I am your one and only empress. The emperor had never heard such bold words before. Though they surprised him, they struck directly at his heart. Even if you hadn't said it, I was already thinking the same. I look forward to our future together, my one and only empress. From then on, news that Rose had been officially acknowledged spread throughout the country. The whole nation celebrated. The emperor even took her personally to major banquets, introducing her to everyone as his only wife. Bazarov's masquerade ball was to be held that very night. Even though he knew the empress would likely be safe, the man still felt uneasy. After all, the Bazarov family had close ties to the 6th imperial mistress. If he had not needed to preside over a case, he would certainly have accompanied her in person. So, you need to find a male escort now. Don't tell me you plan to bring that pet dog. Catching the jealousy in the air, Rose dispelled the emperor's suspicions. The guards would be waiting outside the door and would not accompany her in. Hearing that, the man relaxed a little and immediately suggested she take as many attendants as she wanted. Rose could not be bothered to be polite with him and agreed with a smile at once. As soon as the masquerade began, Rose's graceful figure immediately attracted all the guests' attention. No matter where she went, she became the focus of everyone's whispers. Listening to the constant flattering words, the woman was quite satisfied. Suddenly a man walked up to her. He bowed politely and introduced himself. I'm the host of this banquet, Bazarov. Though his movements were impeccable and his smile extremely pleasant. Rose stared at him and could not smile at all. It was because of this very man that in her previous life, Rose had been saddled with a terrible crime. When the Chariot Empire had been attacked by Barry's army, Rose had been locked in prison. It was Shin who had brought her the news. The villages were empty, and Bazarov had come forward as a witness, testifying that it had been the army led by Princess Rose that committed the act. Returning to the present, the two of them clinked glasses with feigned civility. The woman took a small sip of the champagne in her hand, and her consciousness immediately became hazy. Dizzily, she stumbled into Bazarov's arms. Beautiful Empress, you really can't hold your liquor. I'll help you somewhere you can rest. In front of all the guests, the man lifted the Empress in his arms and gently pushed open a hidden door. He went down the stairs and entered a prison filled with captives. After placing the woman in a chair, he smiled with satisfaction. Having drunk that wine, the Empress would surely not wake up tonight. Just as the man was about to leave, his attention shifted to a naked man lying there. A wicked thought rose in Bazarov's mind. He loved dissecting Baryons most of all, especially when he cut them apart piece by piece. It gave him the greatest sense of accomplishment. Just as he was about to make his move, a woman's voice sounded behind him. He turned around in alarm. There stood the Empress, blazing fire in her hand. Thank you for inviting me to the real ball. Bazarov couldn't believe it. There was clearly wine in the cup, so why was she completely unharmed? Rose merely licked the corner of her lips in provocation. She had once lived through an age of poison in her previous life, so how could she fear this little bit? Rose had only meant to pretend she was searching for the truth, but she never expected the truth to be this cruel. She remembered that in her previous life, Nicola had once written a letter back to her homeland. Nicola had been invited to a banquet, but afterward, both her maid and guard vanished. She had no choice but to write home and ask her father to send another maid. At the time, Rose had assumed the maid had simply run away because she couldn't adapt to life there. But now it seemed otherwise. Thinking of the missing village girls and the sudden rise of a major power, it wasn't hard to guess that this had all been Bazarov's doing. Rose remembered that before the banquet, while checking documents, she had seen one of Bazarov's research papers. Its title was actually the relationship between magic power and the human body. The people of Berry are born with magic. After performing dissections, he could no longer restrain the madness in his heart. He had slaughtered people from his own territory for his experiments, never expecting to run into someone truly dangerous. Rose licked her lips, savoring the taste of the champagne. This level of poison was nothing. Compared with what she had endured regularly, it was laughable. That person seems dead. Did you do it? Sweat broke out on Bazarov's back, yet he still forced himself to stand firm. That was only an imported test subject. He tilted his head toward the people in the cages. They were all live test subjects sent over by the Cruz family. Of course, he couldn't say that, so he could only pin the label of condemned criminals on them. The people around instantly panicked, all talking over one another in denial. A cold meaning surfaced in Rose's eyes. She had no interest in who those people were. What mattered now was that he had intended to use her as an experiment. Bazarov still argued stubbornly, insisting that he had only wanted to conduct some in-depth research with the Empress. But Rose didn't believe a word of it. If it was really in-depth research, then why did he need poison? Rose couldn't be bothered to listen to such absurd excuses any longer. She advanced, flames blazing with overwhelming pressure. It was over. Whether it's you, your experiments, your plans, or your research, all of it will turn to ash. The moment she finished speaking, flames spread through the cells. Seeing the Empress's overwhelming magic, Bazarov was utterly dumbfounded. This terrifying magic was practically unmatched. Now start explaining. Who exactly ordered you to harm me and frame me? Bazarov burst into wild laughter and finally confessed. The one behind it all was the Cruz family. The flames raged, but the door had already been locked shut. Seeing he could no longer argue his way out, the man decided they might as well all die together. He knocked over the cabinet of potions, picked up the only key in the room, threw it to the ground, and crushed it underfoot. You're all being buried with me. Even Rose had never seen anyone crazier than herself. For a moment, she was stunned. Then she hurled flames straight at him. The fire engulfed Bazarov violently. Even as he was about to be burned alive, he showed no regret at all, only releasing bursts of frenzied laughter. And this kind of scum was actually one of the core figures in Chariot's medical world. If he died, medical progress would stagnate. It would be a major loss to the Empire. At that thought, Rose frowned. Suppressing her anger, she stopped. As for the Cruz family, you'd better give me a proper explanation. As soon as she said that, Bazarov collapsed to the ground. Seeing it was getting late, Rose brushed back her hair and left. After all, from the result alone, she herself was safe and sound. If turmoil broke out in the medical world, innocent people would be affected. On a matter this serious, even as Empress, she couldn't decide everything by herself. Outside the palace, Shin checked the time and remembered the Empress's instructions. Seeing that the agreed time had passed, he immediately rushed in with the guards. Everyone began searching aggressively, but they couldn't see Rose anywhere. Just then, several filthy men came stumbling out in a panic. When the guards drew their swords, the men hurriedly blurted out the truth to save their lives. Duke Bazarov and the Cruz family locked us in the dungeon. Just now, a blonde woman burned it down, and that was the only reason we could escape. Following the direction they pointed, the guards immediately sensed something was wrong and ran toward the hidden passage. Before they had gone far, Rose emerged, completely unharmed. Seeing the guards arrive just in time, she immediately ordered them to take Duke Bazarov away. The charges were attempted murder of the Empress and illegal human experimentation and dissection. Then she ordered the exits sealed so no accomplices could escape. As for herself, she was going to enjoy herself for a while. At a banquet without its host, Rose walked to a quieter corner where a man invited her to dance. She politely declined, though she remained wary. But after refusing one man, others stepped forward one after another to invite her as well. Looking at their friendly smiles, it seemed they weren't Bazarov's people. Rose raised her hand and politely refused again, only for a large hand to suddenly seize hers. The emperor had clearly said last night that he had no time for the banquet. Yet tonight, he had secretly come after all. He had been looking around the banquet the whole time, unable to find his wife anywhere. Just then, he happened to overhear someone say, "Where did Her Majesty the Empress go? I just saw Duke Bazarov with her. Did they slip away to talk in private?" The moment the emperor heard that, jealousy surged through him. Then guards suddenly rushed into the hall. Following the direction they ran, he finally caught sight of the empress he had been searching for. He didn't reveal himself at once, but leaned by the wall and listened in secret. Judging from the situation, that woman had gotten into trouble again. Though the banquet was in chaos, the men's attention was still fixed on Rose. The emperor's possessiveness instantly flared. He strode forward domineeringly to stake his claim. His expression was cool, and his tone carried reproach, but Rose could clearly tell it was concern. Calmly, she explained what had happened, then looked toward the man lying on a stretcher nearby. "Bazarov is over there." The emperor looked shocked. Sensing it, Rose quickly eased his mind. "Don't worry, I didn't kill him." Only then did the man come back to himself, though he still didn't know how she had uncovered the truth. Rose bowed respectfully and avoided the question, saying that all the credit belonged to His Majesty. Human experimentation and such brutal crimes had now been exposed, and this would be extremely beneficial for winning the people's support, because the goodwill of the people meant growth in political support. The emperor listened in confusion, yet an unfamiliar feeling rose in his heart. Without realizing it, he pulled Rose into his arms and kissed her. The emperor didn't care whether Bazarov lived or died. All he wanted was for his empress to be safe. Those familiar words made Rose think of her previous life. The emperor had held supreme power, yet his magic could only heal wounds and could not be used in battle. It was completely different from Rose's fire magic. As emperor, aside from the throne's protection, his own abilities were extremely weak. That was why he didn't care much about Buri's intelligence or politics. He only wanted to be with Rose. Rose was momentarily dazed, but a commotion suddenly snapped her back. "Why aren't we allowed to leave?" The guards patiently explained, "Bazarov's accomplices have not yet been identified. Please wait here." Suddenly, the emperor took his wife's hand, his voice overflowing with affection. "Come on, this has nothing to do with us." The moment he said us, Rose froze. Then, when the man invited her again, she smiled and agreed. The guards outside had already been waiting a long time. Seeing the warm scene between emperor and empress, one of them was stunned. Was this still the same emperor who had never cared for women? As soon as the banquet ended, the news spread. The downfall of two great noble houses caused a huge uproar. Duke Bazarov's true face had been revealed, and the power backing him had surfaced as well. It truly was the Cruz family. Though no public announcement had yet been made about how Bazarov would be dealt with, his house would certainly never recover. Meanwhile, an intimate scene kept replaying in Rose's mind. Rose thought seriously about it, but still couldn't understand why the emperor had suddenly begun caring about her so much. Shin's arrival interrupted her thoughts. Thanks to the information he had gathered, this whole matter had gone so smoothly. Holding the heavy reward money, he felt it was far too much. But the empress didn't think so, because besides being a reward, it was also repayment for the previous life and compensation for having disfigured him. Seeing that Rose was unhappy, Shin took the initiative to suggest going shopping. Out on the streets with the breeze blowing, the empress's mood indeed improved a lot. Since they had finally come out for once, of course they should buy something they liked. Who would have thought that Shin, aside from work, showed no interest in anything else? Rose frowned and gave up trying to persuade him. Then Shin suddenly stopped in front of Pet Shop. Rose had thought he was simply obsessed with pet accessories, but it turned out Shin wanted to buy a collar for the Empress's dog. Looking at the pretty collar, he even imagined the Empress walking the dog. Just the thought of it seemed wonderful. No matter how much Rose tried to stop him, he still bought the dog collar with his own money. Was this what people meant by loving the person and loving what belonged to them as well? While his wife was out shopping with a handsome man, the emperor could only sulk at home, thinking back to the beautiful embrace he had shared with his wife at the banquet. He couldn't help blushing and feeling his heart race. Had he truly fallen for that woman? But before he could sort out his feelings, a huge mess broke out on Camilla's side. Because of her stupidity, a once prominent ducal house had completely fallen. Everyone avoided her, and she was forced to hide from place to place. She had grown irritable and depressed to the extreme, and could only pin all her hopes on the emperor. So she used the emperor's sister's name to lure out an innocent court physician for a meeting. When she heard that he refused to help, she immediately flew into a rage like a mad tigress. She hysterically demanded that the physician fix her face, then suddenly pulled a gun and forced him to take her to the emperor. I'm the best candidate to be empress, not that bitch. Her hand trembled nonstop as she held the gun, but the physician didn't even blink. Driven into a corner, she played her final card. In the emperor's beloved elder sister's name, or rather, in the physician's name, she had already written letters to every royal family member. Only then did the physician's expression change. Fortunately, palace guards arrived in time the very next second. They directly threw Camilla into prison, and the physician hurried to report the matter to the emperor. The emperor wasn't really afraid of his countless brothers. The problem was that he also had an elder sister, the empress who had risen to power by killing her own husband. Even the emperor felt a headache coming on. And of course, the more he feared it, the more inevitable it became. When Rose returned from shopping, she brought them a letter from the empress. The letter said she would be coming to visit in 10 days. Rose couldn't help sighing. This family's bloodline really was formidable. Either an emperor or an empress. At this rate, they could conquer the whole world. But the physician only sighed. On the surface, the empress maintained friendly relations with the Chariot Empire. But in reality, she detested the emperor. Rose's mood inevitably sank. In her previous life, although she had conducted fuel trade with the empress's country, she had never actually met the empress. But what did that matter? After dying miserably in her previous life, there was nothing left for her to fear. In fact, she was rather looking forward to meeting the empress whom even the emperor dreaded. Rose quickly accepted it, but the emperor absolutely could not. Ever since he learned his sister was coming, he wore a deadpan expression all day long. Even Rose started getting a headache. Was this empress really that terrifying? A sharp suit, long skirt, neat short hair, so cool. Rose was completely dazzled by the visiting empress. But the empress greeted her with an immediate show of dominance. With a casual wave of her hand, the fountain in the distance splashed Rose and drenched her through. Well, feeling cooler now? Feeling the emperor's "I knew this would happen" gaze, Rose cursed wildly inside. But the other party was the empress of another nation and the emperor's own sister. So Rose could only smile and graciously say she forgave her, addressing her warmly as elder sister. But the empress didn't appreciate it all. Hearing elder sister gave her goosebumps. Fortunately, the emperor still had some conscience and told Rose to go change clothes before returning to receive the guest. The reason the empress disliked Rose so much was actually because she had received a letter from Camilla's family. The letter claimed Rose had a terrible personality and had been deceiving the emperor all along. Because of that, she had even specifically attended Duke Bazarov's ball, and there she had happened to witness the couple being affectionate in public. That only made her even more curious about this younger sibling-in-law. But now that she had seen Rose in person, she thought Rose was nothing more than an impulsive little brat, so slight that even a gust of wind could blow her away. In 2 lifetimes, this was the first time Rose had ever received such an evaluation. That was intolerable. In that case, let's have a match. I'm actually quite skilled with a sword. Layla had begun with an intimate smile. But when she heard it would be swordsmanship, she was more than willing to oblige. Jirban lowered his head and drank his tea silently, thinking this is bad. Sure enough, Rose was defeated in less than 2 minutes, left panting heavily. But through that brief duel, Layla no longer dared underestimate Rose. With swordsmanship like that, if Rose also used her fire magic, the outcome might have been very different. She really was impressive. Rose, too, accepted her defeat wholeheartedly. But suddenly, a large-scale revolution from her previous life flashed through her mind, and its central figure had been the Scorpion Kingdom. What perfect timing. I really shouldn't have called you elder sister just now. I should have called you Annie Layla instead. After all, there should be a nickname between relatives, right? Layla felt as if struck by lightning. Her face flushed red with anger, and she loudly ordered Rose to call her elder sister. Meanwhile, Jirban doubled over laughing. Rose instantly felt much better. Anyone could annoy someone. But at this very moment, Layla was radiating killing intent. These guards were no match for her at all. One after another, they were knocked to the floor. If not for you, or if my magic had been just a little stronger, Chariot would be mine. Layla shouted in fury. She was clearly more than qualified to be emperor, and now her own younger brother was going to hand her over to the rebels of the Scorpion Kingdom. In that case, she would cut off his head and take the throne of Chariot for herself. At that critical moment, a burst of fire shot out and spread between the siblings, forming a massive wall of flame. "Excuse me, Andy, but you're going too far." Rose slowly walked toward them. "Sorry I'm late, Your Majesty." Rose's arrival surprised the Emperor for a moment, but it also reassured him immensely. Even he found this instinctive reaction strange. Only then did Rose notice that the Emperor had been wounded and was bleeding. She was fiercely protective. Anyone who hurt someone of hers would pay the price. Without anyone noticing, the flames had already reached Layla. She tried to block them with her sword, but the fire swallowed it whole. Not giving her time to react, wave after wave of flames rushed toward her. The searing heat kept her from moving. "Annie, do you really want to kill His Majesty that badly? Would it be fine with you even if your country turned into a sea of fire?" That powerful and arrogant figure left Jirbin staring in a daze. The frightened look on his sister's face now was just like his own when he was young. It was the first time he had ever seen it, and for some reason, it made him happy. As expected, Layla was locked up. She had never imagined that the little brat would be even more formidable than the rumors said, and her brother Jirbin really had stumbled into absurd luck to obtain such a sharp blade. On the other side, the Emperor was preparing to send Layla back to the Scorpion Kingdom. But how to send her back became a problem. The Scorpion Kingdom's teleportation magic could only move weapons. Even if Layla were turned into a corpse, she still couldn't be sent back that way. More importantly, if the Scorpion Kingdom collapsed, Chariot would face an oil shortage. Rose remembered clearly that in her previous life, after the Scorpion Kingdom's revolution ended, all oil trade had been completely overhauled. Without fuel, many people in Chariot had frozen to death. So whether Layla lived or died, Rose absolutely could not allow that tragedy to happen again. "Your Majesty, what do you think of Layla? Whether she lives or dies has nothing to do with me." Hearing the Emperor's answer, Rose smiled in relief. "Your Majesty, I have a plan that will bring immense profit. Just leave it to me." At that moment, Layla was resting when the iron bars were suddenly kicked. It startled her so badly her hair stood on end. Then she saw Rose's arrogant expression. Layla was so furious she nearly spat. "Oh good, your temper is still as explosive as ever." Rose looked at her with a smile. "Annie, since you're going back anyway, why not do one thing for your adorable little brother?" Not long after, Layla was escorted back to the Scorpion Kingdom under Rose's watch. But because of the recent turmoil, the city was now burned and devastated. The orphans and nuns from the church had vanished, and the common people were full of resentment toward the imperial ruler. When they heard the Empress had returned, they all kept their distance, only to discover that the person leading the group was someone else entirely. "I am Rose, Empress of Chariot. I have come here specifically to return your Empress." The moment the crowd heard that Chariot supported their revolution, they cheered loudly for Rose. And that commotion just happened to reach a ruined basement hideout. The Empress must be back. The leader of the revolutionary army, who had been hiding there, was finally about to appear. One of the men mocked. "That Empress knows she's walking into death, yet she still dared return. How stupid." With that, he stood up, intending to go outside and put on a show for the people. But the moment he opened the trapdoor, he poked his head out and nearly wet himself. "Hello there, Mr. Revolutionary Leader." Rose was crouching there with a bright smile. And when the townspeople behind her heard that it was their leader, they all wanted a good look at him. But the man was trembling in fear. How had she known he was here? Yes, how indeed? Rose only smiled and gave no answer, then ordered her men to bring him out. "I support the Revolutionary Army. I even brought back the Empress who burned down the church. Everyone here can testify for me." As he said this, an old man who had also been hiding in the basement was dragged out too. The people were shocked. Isn't that the Prime Minister? Wasn't he on the Empress's side? Why is he mixed up with the revolutionary leader now? Poor innocent citizens. This was the true face of the revolutionaries. After that, soldiers also found cash marked with the church's seal, as well as fake imperial army flags and cloaks. Even with such ironclad evidence before them, the prime minister and the revolutionary leader still cried innocence. But in the next instant, they were slapped in the face by reality. The orphans and nuns who had been imprisoned in the basement were found as well. On the spot, one of the nuns identified their crimes. The people could hardly believe their ears. So everything had been done by the revolutionaries, and they had even tried to pin it all on the imperial army. Seeing his scheme exposed, the revolutionary leader broke free and snatched a sword from a nearby soldier. He raised it and charged straight at Rose. At that critical moment, the sword was stopped in midair. This has nothing to do with her. If you're going to kill someone, come at me. Guards! It was Empress Layla. She had stepped in front of Rose. The man collapsed to the floor in fright. Rose smiled. Annie, I can handle something like this myself. Shut up. I wasn't trying to save you. I just won't be able to sleep if I don't execute them with my own hands. With that, she kicked the revolutionary leader flying. That's it? Rose asked teasingly. Of course not. Next is this traitorous old man. Layla thought back to the past. The old man had volunteered to deal with the revolutionary army, yet returned having accomplished nothing. So that was because he had colluded with them. Furious, Layla drove a sword straight through the old man's shoulder. A scream instantly echoed through the room. She intended to torture the old bastard properly. She kicked him again. After all, the one who had almost lost his head because of this old man had not been anyone else but her. The revolutionary leader, taking advantage of the chaos, snatched up the sword on the ground and leaped to his feet for one final desperate attack. Rose gave a light snort and smiled, instantly giving him a great big dose of warmth. Seeing that, the Empress became anxious and immediately moved forward. Don't you dare steal my kill. Don't worry, Annie. I'll leave your share for you. Saying that, Rose smilingly gave the old man some loving warmth as well. Since ancient times, revenge has only felt meaningful when carried out personally. After this, not a single rebel dared act recklessly again. The true face of the revolutionary army was finally exposed, and the church arson had also been their own scheme. Their goal had been to seize the cash and sell the orphans into slavery. This made Rose remember her previous life. Back then, Buri had been on very good terms with the Prime Minister of the Scorpion Kingdom. After succeeding, the old man had even come to Rose's father to brag. She had been shocked when she heard the truth. But as a princess of Buri, she couldn't leak the information. After all, the oil trade couldn't be cut off because of her. Besides, Layla had already been executed by then. Just as Rose was thinking this over, Layla demanded an explanation. How did you know the revolutionaries and the Prime Minister were working together? Rose felt that the two siblings really were alike. They were exactly the same in that respect. But what of it? With imposing confidence, she made a gesture for Layla to be quiet. Layla paused. I only live and die for His Majesty. Even if you're my husband's sister, I still can't tell you, Annie. You do not belong to the people of Chariot. You are the Empress of the Scorpion Empire. Though Layla felt a little displeased, what surprised her was that the people became even more grateful and supportive of her. Ever since the former emperor died, she had told herself she had to grow stronger. She had cut off the long hair that had once represented her true self and become Empress, walking all the way to this day. Rose had not originally intended to clear her name, but when she thought of her own past, she knew what it felt like to be framed. And when she saw Auntie being embraced and supported by her people, tears began to well uncontrollably in her eyes. That kind of painful experience only needed to happen once. With Rose's help, the revolution in the Scorpion Kingdom came to an end. The masterminds were executed one by one, and the Empress firmly secured her throne again. At that moment, Rose set her sights on Annie again. Looking at the signed contract in her hand, she smiled with satisfaction, because as repayment, the Empress had given her 30% of the Scorpion Kingdom's total oil profits. But Layla was simmering with anger. Not only had she had a hand over so much money, more importantly, that little brat had previously made her ride back like a prisoner. It had been utterly humiliating. Rose noticed Annie's displeasure, but only getting 30%? Auntie, you're too stingy. That's an oil field we're talking about. Even if the beneficiary is Chariot, I'm the Empress, so it's all the same. You admit that I'm the Empress of Chariot? Layla looked a little embarrassed at being asked so directly, but now I can understand why the two great dukes, Camila and Bazarov, were no match for you. Rose smiled modestly. Actually, this time we could have gotten 50% of the oil field's total profits, but that would have been going too far. Those words shocked the ministers present, who thought the empress would retaliate on the spot. Instead, she merely smiled knowingly, because she knew that if Rose had wanted to, she definitely could have done it. Though she had already come to like this sister-in-law in her heart, she still said she never wanted to see this she-devil again. That won't do. You're His Majesty's sister, after all. Please take care of me in the future as well. I still don't want to admit you're my brother's wife. Oh, you actually think of His Majesty as your younger brother? That's unexpected. Rose's teasing made Layla freeze for a moment. Thinking of how their father had tormented and used her younger brother when he was little, she did feel a trace of heartache. But remembering how thoroughly they had fallen out before, she still deeply disliked him. No matter what, though, he was the Emperor of Chariot. If they were going to continue using one another, then at the very least, their sibling relationship couldn't be severed. And besides, this time I survived thanks to you. I should thank you. Heavens, you actually know how to say thank you? The Empress gave an arrogant huff. I understand basic manners, at least. Then she stood to personally see Rose off. Rose hadn't expected Annie not only to escort her out personally, but also to remind her all the way to take care of her health. Jirbin and I just had a little quarrel between siblings. We'll still need to keep in contact often in the future. That sincere expression shocked even Rose. Just as she said, "See you again," there came a splash. Rose was drenched from head to toe. Careful not to catch a cold, little brat. Rose forced a smile. Out loud, she said, "Very good, Layla." Annie. But inwardly, she cursed her countless times. Watching Rose leave, Layla sighed. Jirbin, you've ended up with a woman who's not easy to handle. At that moment, Rose handed the contract for the oil field transfer from the Scorpion Kingdom to the Emperor. Everyone was shocked. The Empress had actually obtained 30% of the oil field's profits. But Rose was a little unhappy. She could have gotten more. It was all because that Empress sister had been too hard to deal with. Jirbin stared at her in disbelief. His sister had actually been willing to give up 30% of the profits, and had even told his wife to visit often in the future. After all, the two of them had practically been at each other's throats before. An outcome like this truly exceeded his expectations. It seemed his sister was really satisfied. And you? What exactly did you do? Rose was baffled by the question. She had still been splashed with water before leaving. Was that what he called satisfaction? Rose smiled awkwardly. Nothing. What method could I possibly have? Her Majesty is just broad-minded. Hearing that, the Emperor relaxed instead. As long as you're fine. But when he looked up, he suddenly froze. There was actually a cut on Rose's hand. At that moment, he could no longer hear what his wife was saying. He stepped forward and grabbed her hand, ignoring Rose's surprise. Carefully inspecting it, when he saw that it was only skin cracked by the dry weather, he relaxed considerably. Even though he knew no one could easily hurt her, he still couldn't help worrying. But his actions made Rose blush red. Your Majesty, Hearing Rose's reminder, Jirbin came back to his senses. He hurriedly let go. Then, seeing Rose's shy expression, he embarrassedly covered his mouth, blushed as well, apologized, and told Rose to go back and rest more. His heart pounded wildly. Jirbin thought he might really have gone mad. Even the air itself seemed to grow hotter, not to mention his worry for her. Just touching her hand had shaken him. How shameful, but didn't feel bad. Thinking of how Rose had protected him before, and of the shy look she had just shown, it was over. He liked both sides of her. News that Rose had secured a share of the Scorpion Kingdom's oil fields quickly made the newspapers. The people were so excited they danced with joy. They no longer had to worry about fuel shortages. They no longer had to fear freezing to death. All of this was thanks to Her Majesty the Empress. But this made the Emperor's other mistresses green with envy. Still, one of them was actually delighted. That was Nina, the second among the Emperor's mistresses. The fourth and sixth were already finished and gone. Now it was time to make a new friend. When the news reached Berry, everyone was stunned. They also heard that Jirbin had publicly proclaimed Rose's status as Empress to the whole world. Their scumbag father stamped his feet in rage. If he'd known, he would never have let that damned girl marry over there. He already had mountains of trouble to deal with every day, and it was exhausting him. Now the Scorpion Kingdom had even sent an official document, suspecting that Barry had secretly assisted the revolutionaries. It had to be because Rose and that Empress had said something. His sons and daughters only made things worse. Nicola should have been the one sent to marry there. Exactly. Other than her work, what is there to look at in Sister? Seeing their father at his wit's end, Nicola began plotting again. We need to find a scapegoat quickly. Otherwise, father won't even have time to rest. It's so pitiful. Don't worry. We've already found one. It turned out that her brother Eli had a girlfriend, and she was even princess. But for the sake of giving their scumbag father some peace, love meant nothing. Meanwhile, Rose was enjoying a tea party. Because of everything she had accomplished before, and because the emperor had publicly acknowledged her as empress, everyone was trying to curry favor with her. Since that was the case, she accepted it. Except for one letter. It was from the second mistress, Nina. She had made her identity clear, and nothing in the letter seemed openly hostile. But it was also possible that she was the same sort as the sixth mistress. So Rose couldn't let down her guard. She decided to gather some information first. But the moment she asked about the second mistress, everyone present went silent. I heard she often hosts evening parties. Didn't she invite all of you? Of course she invited us. Though they praised the second mistress aloud, their expressions were distinctly strange. Afraid Rose might misunderstand, they hurriedly declared their loyalty. We recognize only you as the one true empress. Seeing that the mood was off, Rose let the matter drop. As for the second mistress, inviting her to a party, that could wait a little longer. Just then, the short-haired woman beside them suddenly brought up her older brother, saying she had heard something from Princess Burial. Really? What did he say? Apparently, Nicola was planning to hire a new secretary. He described the candidate in an affected, coy manner. It kept everyone in suspense. In the end, he never said who it was. Rose felt her head start to buzz. What a bastard, making a fuss before doing anything. Thinking about it, those occasional leaks in Barry before this were probably connected to him too. Still, something felt off. Nicola was usually loose-lipped, yet he hadn't revealed who the new secretary was. There had to be something fishy going on. Then Rose suddenly remembered her previous life. Not long after she went off to war, Buri had hired a new secretary from the kingdom of Belso. That secretary must have been the replacement they found. Until the day she was dragged to the guillotine, she had never even seen that person, which meant that person, just like her, had been hidden in the shadows and exploited for all they were worth. Rose didn't care whether those people lived or died, but she didn't want to see someone else end up with the same tragic fate she had. As for the man who liked dissecting corpses like some deranged madman, he also happened to be a medical genius. At this very moment, even though Bazarov was locked in prison, he was still humming happily to himself while fiddling with his bottles and jars. The emperor restrained the urge to go over and kill him on the spot. If Bazarov still hadn't been executed, it was only because he still had some use left. But Bazarov was not the obedient type. He directly provoked the emperor with his words. "What is it, your majesty? Are you wary of me because I'm too outstanding? Or because your dear empress and I happen to live in the same city?" The emperor suppressed his anger and warned him to watch his mouth. But Bazarov couldn't care less. In his eyes, the emperor was still as useless as he had been in childhood. Nothing more than a tool for healing others. Someone destined only to be bullied. Hatred had been his only emotion. But Rose's appearance had begun to change him. No matter how much the emperor denied it, Rose was different from other women. Bazarov was crazed with the desire to see her again. Her magic was dense and powerful, and she wielded fire without the slightest fear. For someone like her to be used merely as a sacrificial tool married to the late emperor was such a waste. Back then, he never should have thought of using her as an experimental subject. He should have made her his. At that moment, the emperor dearly wanted to kill him. But that would be too merciful, since Bazarov looked down on people as mere tools. Then he would spend the rest of his life as nothing but a research tool himself. When Jirbin walked out of the dungeon, he was still trapped in the disgust and revulsion he had just felt. Ever since childhood, his father had treated him as a living healing device. Every day, he had been forced to heal piles of soldiers. He had lived worse than livestock. So to him, Bazarov, both a bystander and an accomplice, was like a thorn lodged in his throat. Then suddenly he heard, "Your Majesty." And Jirbin was overjoyed. The person who had come was Rose. "Did something happen? You don't look too well." Jirbin froze. "Why are you here?" "I was heading back to my room." Only then did he realize he had unconsciously wandered all the way to his wife's residence. Seeing the beads of sweat on his face, Rose thoughtfully reached out and wiped him down. Jirbin froze on the spot. He basked in Rose's concern, and when Rose invited him into her room to sit for a while, He agreed without even thinking. His subordinates were stunned by His Majesty's move. Rose, meanwhile, had decided to strike first and poach that scumbag father's capable aide. After all, the person in question was a genius, well worth her making a trip to Belso for. What she hadn't expected was that not only did the Emperor agree, he insisted on accompanying her. When Rose was about to leave the room, Jirbin couldn't bear to part with her and took her hand, pressing it to his cheek like a child seeking comfort. In an instant, all his unhappiness melted away, and when he saw Rose's shy little face, he suddenly realized what a foolish thing he'd just done. Rose and the Emperor arrived in Belso together. They asked a bookstore owner for information. "The person you're talking about is Chloe. That child is really pitiful. She was suddenly driven out of the palace where she worked, and no shops in the country were allowed to hire her. She had no choice but to go to another nation to scrape by. Now she's even ended up in the entertainment district just to survive." Even the Emperor found it regrettable. But a pair of rings illustrated in a book caught his eye. Just when Rose was happily celebrating having obtained an important lead, Jirbin suddenly brought her to a jewelry shop. His lavish spending left Rose speechless. As expected of royalty, buying luxury goods was as casual as buying toys. The next second, the Emperor asked her to hold out her hand and personally put a bracelet on her wrist. He repeatedly warned her not to take it off. Rose was both surprised that the Emperor was giving her a gift and puzzled. Was there something special about this bracelet? After dinner, Rose prepared to head to the entertainment district, but to her surprise, the Emperor wanted to go too. Rose immediately lost her composure. It was one thing to eat and sleep together all day, but now they're going to place like that together? No way. That eye-catching face of his would attract people no matter how well he disguised himself, causing unnecessary trouble. Seeing that the Emperor was unhappy, Rose decided to use her trump card. With a shy expression, she said, "What wife would bring her husband to the entertainment district? That would be ridiculous." As expected, that move instantly worked on him. But Jirbin only had one condition. She was not allowed to take off the bracelet. In the end, Rose successfully brought only her guards with her to the entertainment district. Even so, she still felt puzzled. Could the bracelet contain tracking magic? Otherwise, why had the Emperor emphasized so many times that she mustn't remove it? Just as she was thinking about it, a pleading voice reached her ears. A girl was kneeling on the ground, begging a man for something. Rose recognized the girl at a glance. She was the very person Rose had come looking for. But when Rose saw the man's face clearly, she froze. The man was none other than her useless younger brother, Ailey. Chloe was pleading with Ailey to save her younger brother, but Ailey came up with one excuse after another and refused her request. Even the guard nearby couldn't help but mutter in disgust at his behavior. Because of that, Chloe noticed their presence. At that moment, she didn't care who they were. She directly begged them to buy her for one night because she urgently needed money to treat her seriously ill younger brother. That was exactly what Rose wanted. She readily agreed, but not for just one night. Afterward, Rose followed Chloe back to her home and learned the details of her situation. It turned out that she had once been a palace secretary in Belso. After refusing the harassment of a general, she was slandered by him without limit, fined a huge sum, and driven out of the palace to earn money to treat her sick younger brother at home. She had prepared to go to Barry as a private secretary, but she had no idea it was all part of Barry's scheme. They had never intended to treat her brother at all. Her brother was only bait used to control his sister. So Rose offered her very attractive terms. She would help treat her brother and help the two of them escape their current life. Chloe asked in confusion who they really were. Rose smiled and snapped her fingers. Shin instantly understood and introduced her. "This is Her Majesty Rose of the Chariot Empire." Chloe was so shocked she couldn't say a word. Rose then held out her hand invitingly. "Now, bring your brother with you. Let's go." Today was the founding anniversary banquet of the Kingdom of Belso. Rose and the Emperor had been invited to attend together. The reception official warmly welcomed their arrival. But there was one more person behind them, the secretary Chloe, who had been expelled from Belso not long ago. The official was greatly shocked at the sight of her. The three quickly entered the banquet hall. Chloe was visibly nervous and uneasy. Thinking of the harassment and false accusation she had suffered before, she had no desire at all to step into this place again. Rose soothed her unease with gentle words, looking at the two figures walking ahead of her. Chloe finally truly felt that they really were the Emperor and Empress of Chariot, the ones who had pulled her out of the abyss. and even brought her back to this place. None of it felt real. Soon, the emperor and empress were surrounded by the crowd. Chloe didn't know what she should be doing at a time like this. Then a man's voice rang out. "Miss, are you unwell?" At those words, Chloe's hair stood on end. The moment the man saw her face, his expression turned cold. He grabbed her and shouted that she was a particularly cunning woman, a criminal even, and demanded that someone throw her out at once. Chloe had never seen anyone so shameless. This time, she didn't hold back. She slapped him right across the face. "You already have a wife, yet you still did such filthy things to other people. Trying to seduce women? Just thinking about it makes me sick." The man's wife looked utterly stunned. Enraged, the man shoved Chloe to the ground. But fortunately, Rose caught her in time. Rose angrily demanded, "What do you think you're doing to my companion?" The man had never expected the Empress of Chariot to back Chloe up. Rose smiled and said, "Former Belso Court Secretary Chloe is now employed by Chariot. Do you have a problem with that?" Everyone was stunned to hear it, including Rose's foolish younger brother, Ailey. This meant that after obtaining Chloe, Chariot could completely get a handle on all of Belso's confidential intelligence. That was Chloe's hidden value. Rose turned to the emperor. "Am I right, your majesty?" Of course. Once those words were spoken, no one dared say another word. But the idiotic Ailey recklessly shouted, "She belongs to me." At the moment he saw Rose, he froze. Why had his sister's hair color changed? And why was she standing with that woman? Seeing his wife being harassed, Jirbin coldly said, "Who are you yelling at?" "My wife." Ailey cried out, "Sister," and tried to approach her. But a single glance from Jirbin's terrifying aura scared him so badly that he collapsed to the ground in the next second. "I formally announce that Chloe is now under the protection of the Chariot Empire. If anyone wishes to oppose Chariot over this, I welcome it at any time." The two scoundrels were so frightened they didn't dare make a sound. With just one sentence from the emperor, the little brother-in-law was scared out of his wits and went home empty-handed. That scumbag father was furious. "Why didn't the secretary come?" he yelled, smashing the table and demanding an explanation. How could Ailey dare say that he had been fooling around with a beauty and let someone else snatch the secretary away? He could only sigh and pretend to be innocent, acting as though he had no idea what had happened. That secretary is really ungrateful, daring to go against Barry. We need to teach her a lesson. Listening to his family make empty threats. Ailey could only look helpless. The other side is the imperial family of Chariot. The whole family was stunned. Wasn't the matter of the secretary something Princess Belso personally told us? How did it end up reaching Chariot? His younger sister suggested they go beg Sister Rose for help, but Ailey shook his head repeatedly. From his point of view, Rose only knew how to hide behind men and tremble. Just like before, she was useless at everything. The number one coward. At least say something. What if it works? His sister really had no idea what she was talking about. In that kind of situation, if he hadn't run, was he supposed to stay there and be beaten? The scumbag father grew angrier and angrier, cursing Rose as useless once again. Because he had been told the secretary was coming, he had postponed work for days. Now, looking at the mountain of accumulated documents, another huge pile had just been delivered, and that was only a small part of it. The scumbag father instantly felt like his lower back was about to give out and his shoulders were about to fall off. This miserable working man no longer wanted to do it. Calling Ailey by name, he declared, "By order of the king, all the remaining documents are now yours to handle." Ignoring Ailey's protests, he got up, loosened his tie, and went out to enjoy himself. His mother had always sided with that scumbag father. On her way out, she didn't forget to blame her son for not bringing the secretary back. In any case, whether he found a substitute or did the work himself, if anything went wrong in the end, it would all be Ailey's responsibility. Watching the family cheerfully go off to attend the banquet, Ailey was furious. How did this family feel a little backwards somehow? Meanwhile, Rose and the others had also returned to Chariot. For someone from the south, the first impression of the north was simple, so cold. Calling out to the emperor, Rose said, "Your Majesty, then I'll take them to rest first." Watching the emperor's back, she couldn't help but blush. They had been sleeping in each other's arms every night these past few days, yet nothing had happened. And for some reason, that made her feel more cherished than ever before. She was lost in thought until Chloe's anxious voice brought her back to herself. Looking at the luxurious room, Chloe was so astonished she couldn't close her mouth. Although she had been treated fairly well in Belso too, she had never been allowed to live together with her younger brother. Lord Rose looked so kind, she was glad she had not chosen that family. She vowed to become the Emperor's and Rose's right-hand woman. Who could have expected, though, that the one hiring her would not be Rose? Don't worry, your new employer will be here shortly. Rose gave the secretary she had worked so hard to recruit to the third imperial mistress, Sasha. Sasha had originally refused. After all, she had nothing she could really offer, and having someone as capable as Chloe serve as her secretary seemed like a waste. But Rose didn't think so. In Rose's eyes, Sasha was gentle, kind, and treasured her own people. She would definitely be a good mistress. As for Chloe's younger brother, Rose would ask the best physician to treat him. The two of them looked at Rose with gratitude in their eyes. Sasha had always trusted the Empress's judgment, so she would support her unconditionally. With her brother's illness finally having hope, Chloe was full of motivation. Her little mouth rattled off endlessly, determined to create the greatest possible benefits for Chariot. At that moment, Rose was deeply glad that she had gone to such lengths to poach such talented help, and Chloe did not disappoint expectations. She helped Sasha submit a flawless trade plan to the Emperor. In the Emperor's eyes, Sasha had always been practically invisible, and she had never asked him for anything. Perhaps this time, he could give her a chance. Tell third mistress Sasha this. If she can establish merit, she will not be lacking in reward. Meanwhile, Rose was worrying over something else. To her surprise, even the best court physicians were unable to cure Chloe's younger brother. At present, they could only maintain the boy's basic vital signs. But Rose had already promised Chloe that she would help cure him. Seeing how anxious the Empress looked, the court physician suggested she consult the Emperor. So Rose went to find him. But the Emperor told her plainly that magic could not cure an incurable disease. The Emperor had not wanted to interfere in someone else's business, but when he saw the disappointed expression on his wife's face, he could no longer ignore it. Clenching his teeth, he stood up and told Rose to come with him. Though he spoke stubbornly, saying it was only because Chloe was still useful that he was willing to find a way to treat her brother. Rose was left baffled as she followed the Emperor to a basement. She didn't understand why he was bringing her to a place where prisoners were held. Then, in the next second, she saw someone she never expected. "Oh my, it's been such a long time, Empress Rose. I thought we would never meet again. Seeing you again truly is an honor." Rose had never expected Bazarov to still be alive, much less that he had been locked up by the Emperor. "Your Majesty, what's going on?" The Emperor felt nothing but disgust the moment he saw Bazarov, so the subordinate behind him explained. It turned out that Bazarov was one of the Empire's rare and invaluable court physicians. Though he possessed no magic, his medical skill was extraordinary. His existence could push the entire medical field forward. So the Emperor had no choice but to keep him in the basement conducting research. Even if he desperately wanted to execute him immediately, Bazarov's medical skill was unmatched on the whole continent. So if even he could not cure the boy, that would mean Rose had no choice but to give up. Only then did Rose realize that for her sake, the Emperor had actually allowed her to meet Bazarov, even at the cost of exposing an important secret. And Bazarov had already guessed their purpose. But so what? Wouldn't it be a waste not to take prey that came right to his door? "Have you been well lately, Your Majesty?" "Of course. This is the first time we've met since then." "Former Duke Bazarov. Just call me Dono. Being able to see your breathtaking beauty again leaves me thrilled." The Emperor's expression turned terrifyingly dark, but Bazarov seemed incapable of understanding the concept of restraint. "The last time you used your magic, you burned not only my body, but my heart along with it. Now, both my body and soul belong to you. Though His Majesty seems especially disgusted by my contact with you." Rose glanced at the Emperor standing beside her. Ignoring his expression, Bazarov continued rambling about how the two of them had known each other in the past. "Enough. Are you going to treat him or not?" The Emperor finally roared, unable to bear it any longer. Bazarov smiled wickedly. He would surely make excellent research material. He said it with regret, but those words instantly angered Rose. She warned him not to play tricks, or she'd let him have a taste of being roasted alive. Bazarov burst into laughter. "I was only joking. If we're talking about truly good material, no one compares to you." "Huh, then I'll take that as a compliment. No need to be polite. If you want me to save him, just give me the compensation I want." "And what is that? Could you give me a tube of your blood?" Rose's gaze turned sinister in an instant, but she had no other options. Just as the needle was about to pierce her, the Emperor grabbed her hand and shoved away the face he loathed so much. "Are you treating him or not?" Bazarov let out a long breath. The answer soon became obvious. In just a few days, The boy went from a sickly child to someone full of energy. After another half year of taking medicine, the root of his illness would be completely cured. Though the man was a complete pervert, Rose had to admit that his medical skill truly was unmatched in the world. That also made her understand why the Emperor had kept him alive until now. Lord Rose. The voice instantly brought Rose back to herself. With tears in her eyes, Chloe thanked her profusely. I will never forget this kindness for as long as I live. Thank you so much for finding such an excellent doctor for me. Rose couldn't help grumbling inwardly. That sort of lunatic counted as an excellent doctor? But no matter what, she had to warn the siblings never to mention anything about Bazarov to outsiders. The brother and sister repeatedly promised they would not tell a third person, and only then did they leave the basement. Bazarov was in a marvelous mood. This experience had not only been interesting, but would also help his future research. More importantly, he would receive the compensation he wanted. Though Rose was unwilling, in the end she still tore off a lock of her hair and gave it to him. Bazarov looked at the strand of hair before him in disappointment. What he had wanted was blood, not this. Rose let out a cold snort. Serve him right for having such a rotten personality. The moment she stepped out of the basement, Rose saw the Emperor's figure waiting there as expected, because every time she came to see Bazarov, he would accompany her and then wait obediently outside for her to come back out, before finally taking her hand and leaving with her. Your Majesty, thank you. Truly, thank me for what? For helping and supporting me, and allowing us to successfully gain such an outstanding secretary. As she smiled at him, the Emperor was once again left staring. I don't care what happens to other people, but you are different. Next time, don't come to the basement again without my permission. Rose answered, all right. Ever since her brother's illness had been cured, Chloe worked even harder than before. She was in the middle of saying that Berry's recent economy had been sluggish, and that they might as well take advantage of the chance. But before she finished, she hurriedly apologized to Rose. Berry was, after all, the Empress's homeland, and she blamed herself for speaking out of turn. Rose smiled and said she didn't mind at all. She was now the Empress of Chariot. Besides, after the way they had treated Chloe so rudely, how could she possibly forgive them? They only needed to think about Chariot and proceed according to plan. Meanwhile, the Emperor's second imperial mistress, the pink-haired one, was happily looking at the invitation she was about to send to the Empress. When Rose received Nina's invitation, she originally didn't want to bother with it, but the letter said Nina wanted to become friends with her and had specially organized a party. Thinking that she also hadn't replied to the previous letter, Rose decided that there was no harm in dressing up beautifully and bringing Shin along to meet her once. Whether Nina was genuinely friendly or trying to stir up trouble, she could handle it. The moment she entered, all the ladies around her let out cries of admiration, but she didn't recognize a single one of them. Nor did she see any of the young women who had had tea with her before. Then suddenly someone called out, Lady Rose. The harder something was to eat, the more meaningful it felt. Rose had never been particularly interested in food, but she was still happy to come out and enjoy a good meal once in a while. Not long before they arrived at the restaurant, Sasha had already been missing for a full day and night. When Chloe reported it, the Emperor did not pay much attention at first, but Sasha had been taken away by Nina last night and still had not returned. The Emperor immediately sensed that something was wrong and asked his assistant about the day's schedule. When he heard that Nina had insisted on going out with the Empress and had brought many of her private guards, he slammed his palm on the table and ordered men to go after them at once. They had to bring the Empress and Sasha back. Grinding his teeth, he was furious. He should have gotten rid of Nina much sooner. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, Nina had prepared a special gift. On the stage stood a young attendant. The moment the curtain was pulled aside, the special gift turned out to be Sasha, tightly bound to a chair. Seeing her in such a pitiful state, Rose was frantic. She rose at once, intending to go save her, but Nina's face was full of excitement. Nina stood up with a clang. What exactly are you trying to do? Rose demanded, but Nina only tilted her head innocently and started accusing Sasha instead. It's one thing for her not to attend other people's banquets, but how could she refuse mine too? I had no choice but to invite her personally. And it's perfect that your Majesty is here too. Rose did not want to hear any more. What are you planning to do to Sasha? What about roasting her whole and eating her? Nina said, I've always wanted to try a different kind of meat. Seeing the Empress glaring at her, she looked almost frightened. Aren't we friends? If you become my friend, my father and even the King of Flato will all support you. As the only woman acknowledged by Jirbin's marriage, Nina said she truly liked Rose. So even when Camilla, the sixth imperial mistress, had fallen, she had never thought of harming the empress. She sincerely wanted to be Rose's friend. As long as they got rid of Sasha, they could become each other's only one. Muttering to herself, she made her demand, "Eat Sasha with me, and I'll believe you." Sasha was already trembling beside them. Even Rose, who had endured countless battles and mountains of hardship, could not help but shiver. How could there be such a vicious woman? Nina even said not to worry about Sasha's useless assistant. She would take good care of him too. Then she walked up to Sasha and declared that, as useful gold, no one could compare to her. As for Sasha, she was utterly unworthy. That icy gaze, that childish smile, that deliberately raised pitch. Rose suddenly stiffened. That was right. She had heard that voice in the dungeon in her previous life. After her eyes had been gouged out, that voice had offered to help her. As long as she agreed to be friends, the owner of that voice would plead with his majesty for her. Why had she refused back then? She would rather die than agree. Oh, is that so? Then you can only become an experiment. Blindfolded and unable to see, she had still been terrified out of her wits. After that came inhuman torture. That woman had even hummed a tune, calling her a toy. Although the woman later left, Rose was tormented every single day after that. No wonder she had felt so uncomfortable the first time she heard Nina's voice. So was you. Nina was actually saying Sasha was unworthy of being her friend? You're the one who isn't worthy. When Nina prepared to lay hands on Sasha, magic burst from Rose's hands. The Queen of Flames had returned. Even the onlookers were stunned. The attendant bent slightly at the waist, as if welcoming the Queen's return. Then Rose shouted, and Sasha, wrapped in flames, charged forward. But when Nina saw the Empress glaring and preparing to strike, she cried out, don't come any closer." She pressed the little blade against Sasha's face. "What if I poke right through?" She looked genuinely heartbroken. "I'm obviously more useful than Sasha. Why doesn't your majesty like me?" As she spoke, she held Sasha's head and gently asked for her opinion. When she heard that the Empress did not want to be her friend, that doll-like smile slowly vanished. Her brows twisted like a rabid dog's. Then she turned back, still wearing a sorrowful smile that was steadily losing patience. With one yank, she tore the cloth from Sasha's mouth. "Rather than let me torment you, why don't you just cut ties with Her Majesty yourself?" Sasha was timid, but not so weak that she would let others control her. She shouted, "Lady Rose, I'm sorry. I'm the one who caused you trouble." Hearing that, Rose panicked. "No, I'm the one who brought trouble upon you." But then, with a sickening sound, the little blade stabbed into Sasha's shoulder. It even nicked her lovely ear. Rose's fury erupted completely. She wanted to burn Nina to a blackened cinder, but the two of them were far too close. Rose feared her flames would harm Sasha before they reached Nina. As blood seeped from Sasha's ear, Nina only grew bolder, licking the blade and fantasizing about becoming the Emperor's only woman. With a flick, she threw a dagger toward Rose. "If you want to save Sasha, then cut off your own ear in her place. Come on, start with the right one." Sasha was so terrified her whole body was trembling and drenched in cold sweat. Seeing the Empress hesitate, she ignored the pain and begged Rose to run. She absolutely could not let Rose do something like that for her. Enraged, Nina raised the blade again, ready to stab her once more, practically eager to carve her up. Rose shouted in panic, and Nina sighed impatiently. "Hurry up, then." Rose looked at the dagger in her hand. Maybe if she cut herself just enough to draw blood, then pretended to faint. The moment Nina moved away from Sasha, she could strike. With that in mind, Rose prepared to do it. After all, in her previous life, even her head had been split open. Compared to all that suffering, this was nothing. Only Sasha had ever sincerely prayed for her. But just as she drew a little blood, there came a clamor outside the door, followed by a shout, "By imperial decree." Rose was stunned. Nina was even more shocked. Shin reacted first and ran in large strides to open the door. Nina panicked and tried to call someone to stop him, but Sasha suddenly glared at her, all fear gone from her face. With all her strength, she threw herself sideways, chair and all, crashing into Nina. In that split second, Rose seized the chance and thrust out her hand. A torrent of flames shot straight at Nina, burning her until she howled miserably. Even the soldiers rushing through the door froze in shock, and Rose kept increasing the firepower. Listening to Nina's screams, she said coldly, I absolutely won't let you die quickly. She cut Sasha free from the ropes, then sent a dagger flying, pinning Nina's hand through the palm. Turning back, she gently patted Sasha and softly told her to endure it a little longer, because she still had unfinished business. With one hand, she covered Sasha's eyes, and ignoring the shocked stares of the soldiers, she raised her flames to the maximum with the other. The fire roared like a beast. The soldiers were too frightened to speak. Rose, meanwhile, almost felt grateful to Nina. The Emperor was helpless. He had clearly said that woman was insane, but no one had listened. Seeing the Empress admit her mistake so readily, and even thank him for sending guards to rescue her, he could not bear to scold her further. He only wanted to know how she planned to deal with Nina. When he heard she intended to send her back to her homeland, he sighed heavily, his head aching. I wouldn't object, even if you executed her. He sounded as if exile was too light a punishment. But Rose was satisfied. Yes, burn like that. Wouldn't living be more painful than dying? Seeing the Emperor's speechless expression, she did not know what more to say. Then, unexpectedly, he muttered something softly about her wound. So that awkward expression had actually been concern for her. She was stunned for 3 full seconds before it finally sank in. Still, what was a little injury to the ear? She thought she would just find the court physician later, but before she could speak, a hand reached toward her. In the instant she was still staring blankly, the wound healed completely, as flawless as before. This was the second time the Emperor had healed her. She was so startled that even her thanks came out stammering. Proudly, the Emperor told her to go back. He meant for her to rest well, but instead she went to see Sasha. After all, this incident had started because of her, and she felt guilty. This only made timid Sasha even more uneasy. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have been hurt. Rose touched her ear. The wound is already healed. Besides, you're my precious friend. Seeing Sasha frozen and speechless, Rose asked, "Don't tell me you don't want to be friends with me?" She even imitated Nina's drooping brows and unhappy expression. Sasha hurriedly shook her head. To be able to become your friend is a blessing I must have earned in a past life. Only then did Rose feel somewhat reassured. But she still wanted to thank Chloe and went to make preparations. Yet what Chloe said completely overturned what she thought. Because His Majesty loved her very much, that was why he had sent troops immediately. This was the first time even Sasha had seen the Emperor care so much about someone. And the bracelet on Rose's wrist carried an extraordinary meaning. Staring at it, Rose still found it hard to believe. But only a few days later, the Emperor invited her to dine with him again. Rose was still completely focused on work. If the Emperor was looking for her, then he must have business, right? Her puzzled gaze left the Emperor puzzled too. What is it? She voiced her doubts and asked what exactly he wanted with her. Because I missed you. The Emperor said it so seriously that her face could not help flushing red. In the kingdom of Belso, it was said that lovers exchanged bracelets as tokens of affection. A man would have one made with a gemstone the same color as his eyes, and by giving the bracelet, he declared that this woman belonged to him. Remembering Chloe's words, Rose stared at the bracelet, her cheeks growing hotter and hotter. Perhaps not wanting to embarrass her too much, the Emperor seriously offered another reason. He needed useful intelligence. Then he gave her that unruly smile. That's more my style, isn't it? So, do you have any useful new source of funds? After being thoroughly tormented by the Empress, Nina was finally being forcibly sent away today. She cried and refused to leave. What's wrong with forgiving me just once? Looking toward Rose in the distance, she wept, her shoulder still pierced through. Let's make up, please. Please? I really have reflected on what I did. I can even apologize to Sasha. But when she saw the Empress frown in annoyance, she felt even more wronged, bawling like a child throwing a tantrum. Even after being shoved into the carriage, she still stretched out her claws, refusing to let them close the door. Rose silently watched her performance. Still, that shrill voice really was hurting her ears. Only after the carriage door was finally shut did she murmur softly, "Farewell, Second Imperial Mistress. May you live a long life." The reason she had not killed Nina was because for someone like her, living this way was far more frightening than death. And the reason Rose had been working so hard, besides revenge, was also the Emperor's change. The tyrant who had once invited her to fall into darkness with him in her previous life had recently not only sent soldiers to save her. Especially after learning the meaning of that bracelet, her heart could no longer calm down. Now she was the Emperor's woman, and the Empire had recognized her as its Empress. but personally healed her wounds and kept inviting her to dinner. Especially after learning the meaning of that bracelet, her heart could no longer calm down. Now she was the emperor's woman, and the empire had recognized her as its empress. When she thought of the night the emperor had escorted her back and softly whispered good night in her ear, it felt almost like being in love. Lying in bed, she tossed and turned, unable to sleep. She wondered if the emperor was the same. Then suddenly, an image flashed through her mind of falling asleep in the emperor's arms. Her face burned bright red. Though she had already lived 2 lives, when it came to romance, she was still inexperienced. Thinking of the tyrant who had once invited her to fall with him, and how dearly he now treasured her, she told herself she could not keep indulging in wild thoughts. For now, the emperor's 2nd, 4th, and 6th consorts had already been dealt with. Next, it was time to deal with her so-called family. The first step in her revenge was to obtain the Pearl Sea belonging to Flotto. It was also a way to maintain the emperor's trust in her. Fortunately, up to now, no one seemed to realize that the Flotto Sea region contained pearls, and any action by chariot would attract attention. So until she secured it, that secret absolutely could not leak out. So she decided to slip away to Flotto in secret, and she planned to take 2 friends with her. Big Fur and Second Fur, the 2 little black dogs. Since they would depart tomorrow, today was the last special training session. Whether it was reaction speed or bite force, she was quite satisfied with the pair. But you 2 must behave yourselves, all right? Whenever she trained the dogs, the emperor would always watch from upstairs. Before, she had always pretended not to notice, but today, unusually, she waved and greeted him. Seeing that the emperor did not react much, she felt a little awkward. If it were Camila, would she be speaking sweet nothings to the emperor by now? But Rose felt she really had no talent in that area. After thinking it over, she decided it was better to keep training the dogs. After all, the emperor did not expect that sort of thing from her. Rather than dwell on it, she might as well prepare properly for tomorrow. This time, however, she had guessed wrong. That simple wave alone had already left the emperor's heart itching. There was even a faint flush on his face. Even when his little assistant brought over reports, though he said aloud, "Put them down," his eyes remained fixed longingly on the window. His wife was always thinking about building her career, but all he wanted was to kiss her, hold her, and lift her in his arms. Sleeping alone at night in a bed 2 meters wide, he always felt an indescribable emptiness and loneliness. He would imagine his wife lying beside him, but imagination was still only imagination. The moment he clenched his hand, it all dissolved. Then someone said, asking whether the flower basket on his desk should be replaced, and only then did he slowly come back to himself. Looking at those dried-out flowers, he remembered that they were the first gift the empress had ever given him. Compared to how bright they had once been, they had now gradually yellowed and withered. "Let me replace them for you." "No need." As the emperor spoke, he cast healing magic. In an instant, the flowers came back to life. The young assistant was stunned. The emperor, who never treated people, was now not only healing the empress's injuries, but even healing the empress's flowers. What a rare sight. Yes, who could deny it? The emperor's eyes were now full of that bouquet, and the curve at his lips made it obvious. He had already fallen in love. Meanwhile, in Nina's family home in the kingdom of Flotto, the mood was completely different. News arrived that their daughter had been sent back, and her father could hardly believe it. Only after seeing the document Chariot had sent did he understand. Nina Arlenskaya had committed violence against the empress. His heart was full of unwillingness and fury. But what could anger do? At this very moment, Rose was already on her way. She arrived at the Flotto royal palace with a letter along with Big Fur and Second Fur, catching the king and queen completely off guard. Looking at the few of them with their heads lowered in silence, she apologized verbally for her sudden visit, while the 2 dogs at her feet looked ready to bite at any moment. The king was so frightened that he hurriedly admitted fault. "In the matter of Lady Nina, we were indeed greatly at fault." Hearing that, Rose could not help laughing. Nina had threatened and attempted to murder the empress. Yet in the king's eyes, the attempted murder of a foreign empress was merely a fault. It seemed their loyalty to Chariot was no more than this. The royal couple were indeed terrified and kept saying it was all a misunderstanding. Rose mentioned that Emperor Jirbin was furious, to the point of wanting to use military force. But if war really broke out, Flotto had no ability to resist. Just as the king fell into despair, Rose changed her tone, saying she had not agreed to that, giving him hope again. Of course, that still depended on the king's sincerity. If he could cede part of his territory, then she would only pursue the crimes of Nina's family, and no war would occur. The king had just been thanking her profusely, but upon hearing cede territory, his mood plunged like a roller coaster. But wasn't it a bargain to avoid a war by giving up just a small piece of land? For instance, the kingdom's only port, and the worthless stretch of sea beside it. The king and queen had no room to refuse and could only sign the agreement. Besides, that port was practically useless anyway, just a backward rural wasteland. Even Nina's father thought giving up that place was no great loss. What mattered most was repairing relations with Chariot as soon as possible. Otherwise, their family would disappear from the kingdom's noble history. So when Rose was leaving, he hurriedly chased after her, apologizing on his daughter's behalf and offering all sorts of explanations and excuses for her. Then he took out a letter his daughter had sent home. Every word in it was proof of Nina's sincere wish to be Rose's friend. According to her father, after being rejected, Nina cried every day in heartbreak. Judging from the contents of the letter and the private seal, Rose felt the old father was not lying. Recalling those strange moments of closeness with Nina, Rose could not help thinking of her own scheming younger sister. Spoiled by their parents and brothers, she had become someone pitiable, incapable of forming proper relationships or distinguishing right from wrong. So what fault did they truly bear? Moved by the old father's earnest plea, Rose forgave Nina. The old father was overjoyed, but someone still had to pay the price for his daughter's wrongdoing. After all, if a child is not taught, the father is to blame. If he had raised his daughter into someone so twisted, then he should accept punishment. Strands of flame twined around the man's body, and amid shrill cries, Rose turned and elegantly stepped into the carriage. This time, she had truly forgiven Nina. But after seeing the vicious look in the old father's eyes, would he seize a chance for revenge? No sooner had Rose secured Flato's Pearl seaport than the news spread across all the kingdoms. Everyone was praising Rose, how capable she was, how brilliant. And this was not even the first time. To her father, the useless daughter had begun leading the notorious Chariot to new heights. That made him furious. If things continued like this, the wicked woman image they had created for Rose in the past would likely start to be questioned by the people. Listening to his father's nagging, Ailey was miserable too. Ever since he had taken over his father's work, he had no idea how long it had been since he last saw Nina. No, since he had any peace at all. At that very moment, Nikra appeared anyway, spinning in circles and calling out, "Brother, how does my new dress look?" Seeing her brother's perfunctory response, she put her hands on her hips and huffed. "Can't you see I'm busy? Unlike you, who spends all day doing nothing but fooling around." Hearing his complaints, she replied with an innocent face that his work efficiency was just too low, and now when sister used to do it, she did not even need an assistant. That was the worst possible thing she could have said, and it completely enraged him. He grabbed a file and hurled it at her. Yet in the end, she still acted unbearably wrong. Compared with that, Rose's side was refreshingly straightforward. After obtaining the king's signature, she went straight to the port. The sea there was beautiful, but the surrounding area was broken down and desolate. They had walked all the way in and had not seen a single person. It was Flato's only port, so how could it be so backward? It made no sense. Her instincts told her that the quieter a place was, the more likely something was wrong. So before mining the pearls, she needed to investigate thoroughly. She put on a mask, leaving the guards beside her baffled about what she intended to do. But all of their movements were already under Nina's father's watch. He had even set an ambush around the port, thinking of his daughter's ruined state, then looking at his own battered body and burned head. And with even the noble title of his proud family stripped away, he could only see ruin ahead. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, cursing that damned empress. With a wave of his hand, he gave the order, "Bring that she-devil before me immediately." With just a few words, Rose had taken possession of an enemy nation's sea territory. There were pearls here beyond counting, yet the nearby villages were so abandoned they looked like dumps. When she finally encountered a living family, all three of them were suffering from illness. Rose traveled around quietly and discovered that the entire village was the same. More interestingly, those who were seriously ill were almost all the men of the household, and they all suffered from numb, paralyzed limbs. That made pearl extraction a major problem. She had originally intended to bring in troops from Chariot, but there was something deeply wrong about this village. Before the pearls were even mined, the soldiers might become infected too. If this were left to the emperor, he would probably burn the entire village down. But now Rose was in charge. She decided to improve the surrounding facilities first. When she arrived outside the village chief's home, she did not have the courage to go in immediately and asked Shin to enter first and assess the situation while she remained by the shore, letting the sea breeze blow over her. The elderly and the children here were all suffering terribly from disease, and the graveyard was crowded with tombstones. She had a bad feeling. The village chief might no longer be alive either. When Shin finally located the chief's home, it was exactly as Rose had feared. The chief had already been dead for who knew how many days. While Shin was examining the cause of death, a dagger suddenly appeared behind him. In the next instant, he was seized and had a blade pressed to his throat with a warning not to make sound. The assassin's mind raced. Should he use this corpse to lure the Empress's attention, or would it be better to take a hostage directly? But before he could get far, the two big black dogs charged up from behind. The assassin was stunned. Weren't these the Empress's pet dogs? How could they be this vicious? He was pounced to the ground and left utterly unable to fight back. Even his mask was torn apart. How could he have known that these two large black dogs were specially trained bodyguards for Shin, personally trained by the Empress to protect him? Just look at those savage fangs. The assassin felt as though he was about to be swallowed alive. Looks like the training went pretty well. Shin had originally thought bringing dogs to meet the village chief would be inappropriate, so he had left them waiting outside. Unexpectedly, that'd save his life. Thinking of how the Empress had wanted to protect him, his lips beneath the mask could not help curling upward. But when he heard the assassin curse foully, his expression turned cold again. "You can scream your throat raw and it won't help," he said. "Big Fur and Second Fur only obey one name, Her Majesty's." Just as he was about to order them to stop, Rose stepped through the door at exactly the right moment. The two dogs stopped biting the instant they heard her voice, then rushed to her side, wagging for praise. "Good job." The two dogs were so delighted they could hardly contain themselves. Looking at the half-dead assassin, Rose released fire from her palm. "Since the flesh is already rotten, let it turn to ash." The man begged desperately for mercy, but it was too late. Yet while he writhed in the flames, Rose noticed something unusual. She clenched her fist and withdrew her magic. Step by step, she walked over. After looking carefully, she realized it was the tattoo of Nina's family. She let out a cold laugh. How wonderful! While Nina's father was still shouting impatiently about why there had been no response yet, one of his men rushed in a panic. Before he could even catch his breath, Rose had already stormed in. With a thud, she threw the assassin in front of him, returning him to his rightful owner. She demanded a reasonable explanation from Nina's father, but to her surprise, he actually tried to deny it. "What are you talking about? I don't understand at all. Is that so? Then shall I ask His Majesty the King?" She smiled very politely and calmly took out a torn piece of cloth. "Look, the assassin even has the family crest on him." Rose walked forward step by step, while Big Fur and Second Fur bared their teeth as if ready to tear in him. They even pressed him to hurry up and find a way to improve his relationship with Flotto. He was put in an impossible position, and at the time, Nicola was already the Empire's Empress. She should have gone in person to negotiate with the kingdom, yet instead she wrote home asking her family for pearls. Maybe his situation was difficult. He didn't want to add to his sister's burden, so he reluctantly agreed. The family was overjoyed. After all, when Rose took action, she was worth two people. And, just as they had expected, Rose really did get the pearls. But why were there only so few? Looks like they couldn't give them to Nicola after all. Their parents spoke with happy faces, yet greedily wanted even more. At least enough to make a bracelet. Her memories were pulled back. Under Lot's management, the fishermen's illnesses quickly improved. They all seemed sharper too, and stronger on their feet. At a time this happy, how could they not go back to work? After recovering overnight, the secret of pearls hidden in that stretch of sea was finally discovered. It was the first time everyone had seen so much real treasure. Even though Rose had known about it long ago, when she saw it with her own eyes, she still couldn't help swallowing. But what made her even happier was the gratitude of the fishermen here. In her previous life, they discovered the pearls, only to have them all stolen away without getting a single coin. But now it was different. Holding a big handful of pearls, She remembered how in her previous life she struggled so hard, yet didn't get even half a pearl. She suddenly had no mood to admire them, but soon the corners of her mouth lifted again, because now things were different. Looking at the pearls almost overflowing from the basket, maybe she should make a necklace. It was the only way she could make it up to herself. She just didn't know whether the emperor would agree. After saying goodbye to the fisherman, she happily returned to Chariot with the pearls, completely unaware that the emperor was about to be driven mad by his father-in-law. The emperor had finally had enough. Such a cute and capable wife, and they wanted him to send her back? Just as the thought of dealing with Barry crossed his mind, Rose arrived carrying a basket overflowing with pearls. She said she wanted to present them all to the emperor, and there would be even more later. She only wanted to keep a few. She looked at him with questioning eyes, but the emperor had been staring at her the whole time and had no mood to look at the pearls at all. That made her a little awkward. "Do you have something to say to me?" Caught off guard, a flicker of surprise crossed the emperor's face. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Looking at his slightly embarrassed wife, he finally asked about how Rose had been turned into a scapegoat by her family. "When you realized something was wrong, did they know?" Shin, standing at the side, was trying to guess the emperor's meaning. Rose tilted her head, her tone dangerous. "If they knew, how could I have acted?" Then the emperor asked about the letters written by her trash father. Where did those letters go? Knowing he was referring to those letters, Rose was startled for a moment, but soon the corners of her lips curved up again. Flames burst from her hand. Of course, they've already turned to ashes. She even asked the emperor to cover for her afterward. The emperor liked this side of her very much. The two of them couldn't help laughing happily together. Both felt much more at ease inside. As long as he didn't let go, what could Barry do to her? But over on Barry's side, Nicola was already furious. After her brother lost his temper at her, she went to their parents. Not only did she not complain, she even begged them to give her brother a break. Her brother had been working nonstop and couldn't even go out to have fun. It was just too pitiful. If he could enjoy himself, then surely he wouldn't lose his temper at her. But to her surprise, their father, who had always doted on her brother, just sipped his tea leisurely and refused. After all, the throne would be inherited by his son. If he didn't adapt early, how would that do? Hearing Nicola mention Rose, the trash father grew even more irritated. When he saw her shouting for them to hurry and find a substitute, the nameless fire in his chest flared up. He directly told his daughter to go find one herself. If she couldn't, then she should just behave and stay put. Everyone was taking their anger out on her. Nicola had never felt so wronged in her life. She grabbed a pen and wrote to Chariot, demanding that the emperor return her sister. Anyway, the emperor had so many mistresses. He didn't need her sister in particular. But after several days, Chariot didn't send back so much as a reply. In a moment of foolish impulse, she actually decided to go and bring her sister back herself. When the king learned of it, cold sweat broke out on him. When he saw the determination on Nicola's face, swearing she would definitely bring her sister back, the old couple nearly fainted on the spot. But Nicola sat in the carriage delighted beyond measure. If the emperor could be so kind even to a woman like her sister, then if he saw me, he'd surely be so moved he'd want to marry me, right? Instead, she won herself a prison cell. The charges were illegal intrusion into the imperial city, kidnapping the Empress of Chariot, and one more. Great disrespect toward the emperor. It would have been one thing if her sister hadn't helped her, but she even added insult to injury. Nicola's eyes filled with tears, yet she still had no awareness of her own fault. "What's wrong with bringing you home?" She kept saying her sister was too much. The speed with which she confessed her crimes even shocked the two soldiers standing beside her. Even when she heard someone call her stupid, her pig brain still couldn't understand. The emperor had already ordered her sister taken away, and Rose had even smiled and said goodbye. Yet she still unwillingly kept calling for her sister, hoping Rose would help her. But it was useless. Once the reality of imprisonment set in, she started crying anxiously, but the insults coming out of her mouth only became uglier and uglier. She really seemed to think her life was too long. The two soldiers outside couldn't help mocking her. She had actually tried to take away the emperor's only beloved empress. The meaning behind their words was clear. Something was seriously wrong with her head. Nicola refused to believe that the rumors in the newspapers were actually true. She still couldn't understand why everyone favored her sister. Why did no one love her? But this was only the beginning. Compared with being toyed with by the imperial mistresses in her previous life, this life had already been far happier for her. Still, from this moment on, Rose hoped that all of Nicola's misfortune would come because of her. Dressed to the nines, she came to Nicola's door. Ignoring Nicola's cries for help, Rose asked, "Did Father and Ailey send you?" Nicola hurriedly nodded and said yes. But after only a few more words, the truth came out. So she had secretly run here all by herself. That put Rose at ease enough to go attend the banquet. Unexpectedly, Nicola refused. "You have to take me with you." Rose only smiled in a darkly charming way. "The Emperor may very well kill you to silence you." Nicola shuddered in fear at once. But what shocked her even more was that her sister was wearing over 100 pearls around her neck, all of top quality. And that custom dress, she had never seen anything like it in her life. After showing off enough, Rose really did head off to the banquet. Hearing Nicola's indignant cries behind her, Rose felt that the thing she could only do in her previous life, watching others go out and enjoy themselves, had finally been broken. It truly felt good. And when she appeared all dressed up, even the Emperor, who was never interested in women, looked at her twice more and said the pearls looked beautiful on her. But Rose only had business on her mind. She was curious how the Emperor would deal with Nicola. When she got the expected answer, that Nicola would be executed, she objected. "That's too lenient. I suggest locking her up for life." Specifically in the same prison cell she had been thrown into in her previous life. "I just don't want two disgusting creatures inside the imperial city." Though the Emperor spoke that way, he still handed full authority over the punishment to his wife. Though it'd be best not to leave even a corpse behind. Rose was surprised, but also very satisfied with the Emperor's attitude. In a lively, bustling banquet hall, the Empress made a dazzling entrance before everyone's stunned eyes. Abandoned after marriage by the kingdom, she had instead become a treasure in the eyes of the Emperor, who valued only worth. But she would not give up revenge because of that. She would trample underfoot the family who had used her. And Nicola was the first unlucky one. Back in her previous life, when she was still the Empress of Chariot, she had often been bullied by these noble ladies. Not only would they not invite her to banquets, they would even lay hands on her. But she had only dared throw tantrums in the courtyard, because even her royal father never came to help her. Thinking back to her time in Berry, when all the men used to orbit around her, the more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Fortunately, timid Sasha appeared before her. After lecturing Sasha haughtily, her mood instantly improved. She even ran to sun herself in the courtyard beneath the Imperial Office building. The Emperor looked at her as if he'd seen something filthy. He had clearly said this place was off limits, though his assistant had already gone to deal with it. His mood was still terrible. If not for the need for a hostage, he would have gladly killed that woman on the spot. Not long after marrying this woman, the platinum route disappeared, causing huge losses to the empire. Worse still, winter was coming. His sister Layla had died in the revolution, and the kingdom no longer supplied Chariot with oil fields. That meant many people would freeze to death this winter. He truly had twice the headache. Meanwhile, Nicola was still laughing happily in the sun. But at the same time in this life, she really couldn't laugh anymore. Imprisoned, she could only cry pitifully. According to her original plan, her sister should have waited on her like a maid, and the Emperor should have been utterly bewitched by her. Just as she was thinking that, her sister's voice came from outside the door, saying that in a while there would be a ladies' tea gathering. Several young, noble ladies wanted to meet her. All her previous unhappiness instantly vanished, especially when she heard that a dress had been prepared for her. She excitedly threw herself at her sister. But she felt no gratitude at all, because in her mind, her sister should treat her this way. Once again hearing the noble ladies flatter her one by one. They say all those aristocratic young men are lining up to court you. It's really enviable and impressive. She was enjoying it immensely. On the outside, she acted shy, but inside, she was already getting carried away. Sure enough, compared to her sister, she was the one everyone wanted to talk to. "You came to Chariot alone. Won't her family worry?" It was only a simple sentence from them. Yet she immediately started complaining nonstop about how her parents had endless banquets to attend, how her brother had endless work to do. She even blurted out all the state secrets her brother had angrily said before, and then still added, "This is a secret, you know." Even Rose was amazed by just how simple-minded and stupid Nicola was. But this was exactly the result Rose wanted. She had thought coaxing information out of Nicola would be easy. She hadn't expected it to be this easy. After smiling and seeing Nicola off, she was very satisfied with how these girls had performed. But it also made her even more certain that these people and Nina were basically the same kind of people. The only difference was, that they had never directly laid hands on her. After Nina left, Rose became the one these people attached themselves to. Still, she truly was surprised. She had only just instructed them to sound Nicola out a few minutes earlier, and they had prepared so quickly and performed so brilliantly. Though we can't become friends, I won't let you come to harm. Just imagining Nicola's expression now. She was probably feeling wonderful being weighted on hand and foot. But that was fine. All the pain of being used in the past. This time, Rose would reclaim it slowly. They were the most dangerous couple to provoke, yet both had suffered the tragic fate of being used and discarded. After the Emperor learned the truth, he took his wife for a walk in the sunlit courtyard. Their sweet and intimate manner made the two hidden watchers panic. They hid behind the bushes wanting to gossip, but just when they were watching most intently, "What are you doing here?" This little interruption from Lady Sasha did nothing to affect the Emperor's private time with Rose. "You seem to like coming to this greenhouse." "Yes," Rose said, playing with her hair. It wasn't only because she liked flowers, but also because Sasha liked this place too. But the hand the Emperor was holding had stayed clasped the whole time. Embarrassed, she said, "Your Majesty, aren't you going to let go?" Unexpectedly, the Emperor asked in return, "You don't want me to?" Once again, she was accidentally charmed by him. Thinking back to how furious the Emperor had been when Nicola first arrived, she asked curiously, "What exactly did Nicola do to anger you so much?" "I heard you aren't the king's biological child." For a moment, she was surprised. But more than that, speechless. That idiot Nicola had actually blurted out even that. After all, in Barry, bloodline was the greatest weakness. She thought the Emperor would be disappointed, but instead he gently brushed her dark golden hair. For the first time, he told her about his own equally ugly background. The late Emperor had dozens of mistresses. But once they bore a child, they were abandoned. He was just one of those children. That was why Layla, who was nominally his older sister, had never thought well of him. On the day he became emperor, his mother was sentenced. He spoke of all this as calmly as still water. Rose felt heartache for him, and was also surprised that this man would tell her all of it on his own. There were rumors that he had personally killed the late emperor. She didn't know whether that was true, but the late emperor certainly deserved to die. Whatever the truth was, she didn't care, whether it was the emperor or herself. Neither of them had been cherished since birth. But so what? Back then, you were so strong that they had no choice but to make you emperor, didn't they? Even if we were cast aside, we made it to today because we were strong enough. All we need to do is what we did before, treat those insects who want to use us as stepping stones. I'll help you burn all those people to ashes. Maybe our meeting happened precisely because our fates are so alike. That's right, they really were a pair destined for each other. Rose suddenly had that thought as she leaned against the Emperor's broad shoulders and enjoyed the moment. But if you don't like it, you can push me away. The Emperor hadn't expected his wife to be so direct, but how could he bear to push her away? Inside, he was already overjoyed. Sasha never expected that she would really get to witness such a scene. A few days after Nicola was imprisoned, the kingdom of Eanes, part of the Berry Alliance, sent people to see the Emperor. They said the matter of the second princess spreading out would not look good. The Emperor even specially had someone notify Rose. Rose was unexpectedly anxious. Someone was actually standing up for a fool like Nicola. The fact that the Emperor took the initiative to share matters of state with her showed that he now trusted her greatly. Perhaps it was because of the warmth they had shared yesterday. But when Eanes was mentioned, she suddenly remembered something. A slight smile rose at her lips. "Shin, make the arrangements. I like to attend too." Meanwhile, the envoy from Eanes finally revealed the real purpose of this visit. They wanted to request a joint campaign with Chariot to take down other countries together. Looking at the battle plan in his hand, the Emperor was tempted. With weapons and funds both sufficient at present, he thought it might be time to consider expanding the Empire's territory, and once again make Chariot's name thunder across the world. But Eanes was neither kin nor the homeland of any of his mistresses, so he could not fully trust them. Still, it was no major problem. A tiny country like Eanes, small as a slap of land. If they dared play tricks, he was confident he could make them pay. But just as he was about to agree, Rose arrived. "May I come along?" She smiled with strength and confidence. After glancing through the information in hand, it was exactly what she had expected. The methods of the Kingdom of Eanes are still as clumsy as ever. "So, Your Majesty, please reject this proposal." She gave no reason and no explanation for the refusal. deal. Bean's envoy panicked immediately. But before he could finish the words he had prepared to persuade the emperor had already agreed to Rose's request. Please inform your king. I refuse to provide support. The aides were all dumbfounded. The emperor had clearly been about to agree just a moment ago, yet a single sentence from the empress had changed his mind. Looks like the third mistress was right. This couple really was both perfectly matched and terrifying. Only after the Ean's envoy had been sent away did the emperor ask why. He could never have imagined it. The real purpose behind Eanes' request for aid was to get its hands on the empire's weapons. The same thing had happened in Rose's previous life. After obtaining high-quality weapons, Eanes had sold them all off cheaply to Barry. Under the banner of assistance, they embezzled the weapons. This time, however, they had chosen the wrong people to trick. And besides, the king of Eanes and his princes had all been unable to stop talking about Nicola. That left Rose somewhat displeased. The emperor, upon hearing this, felt a headache coming on too. He couldn't believe that woman had such charm. But it doesn't matter. Your Majesty, I have a suggestion. The moment the Eanes envoy left, Rose proposed that the emperor choose Eanes' enemy, Cancel, instead. Because Chariot's platinum route passed by there, the two countries were not completely unrelated. And in her previous life, after the platinum route was attacked, Cancel had been falsely accused of being the culprit. Chariot then attacked it mercilessly, and Cancel paid enormous compensation, nearly losing the country itself. And now, because its national strength was weak, it had become the target of Eanes as well. Rose found this sort of bullying of the weak deeply distasteful. But the emperor didn't understand. What benefit could that little country possibly bring? There's nothing there except wheat. But that's exactly why, Rose said, that wheat can save Chariot in winter. Though at the moment, it was merely a stop along the platinum route. If Chariot gave even the slightest sign of support, Cancel would eagerly throw itself behind Chariot. To be able to ally with Chariot, Rose believed Cancel would be willing to do anything. It wasn't only wheat. Whatever demands they made, Cancel would agree to them. For example, after Eanes surrendered, all the indemnities it paid could go straight into Chariot's pockets. And Cancel would probably be overjoyed and grateful for it. But Eanes was different. It was said they had recently been vigorously developing their military. Rose's meaning was obvious. Helping Cancel fight Eanes would not only bring in a large sum of money, it would also solve Chariot's shortage of winter supplies. So then, who should we make surrender? While everyone was still stunned, she gave the emperor another perfectly reasonable explanation. Dealing with Eanes would be simple. All they needed to do was throw out the super hostage they had in hand. I see. The emperor was moved by this proposal that promised benefits and no drawbacks. Not only did he agree, he actively and enthusiastically backed his wife. He immediately ordered the aides beside him to send people to the kingdom of Cancel at once. And he himself would go as well, then move straight on to Eanes. Taking his wife's hand, he said, "You should come too. Of course, I'm willing to set out with your majesty." With the terrifying couple joining forces to stir up trouble, the subordinates fell into another flurry of panic. Only Shin remained calm. "But can I take my younger sister with me?" Rose smiled darkly. The emperor was equally cooperative. Not only did he agree, he even said she should be brought out and properly entertained. He could hardly wait to see the king of Eanes and his princes become utterly infatuated with Nicola. A hostage that valuable, how could she be kept in a filthy dungeon? The king of Eanes was furious. Chariot was so powerful, yet had rejected his invitation and turned around to ally itself with a small country like Cancel. But what he never expected even more was that the emperor had now come knocking at his door with his wife. There weren't many soldiers, but each one carried an AK. The emperor sat there radiating dominance, perfectly fine with either surrender or war. He set the surrender treaty directly on the king's desk. The general terms were, Eanes was forbidden from invading Cancel, must swear loyalty to the Chariot Empire, must compensate Chariot for the losses incurred during this journey, and finally cede just a tiny bit of territory. Rose politely informed them of Chariot's conditions. Unexpectedly, the king of Eanes didn't seem very willing. "Do you have some other idea?" Rose was only stunned for 3 seconds before a familiar smile rose at the corner of her mouth. The emperor followed her rhythm and waved his hand. Nicola was then thrown before everyone's eyes. The moment they saw her, the king and both his sons indeed became anxious. "What exactly is going on?" "Nicola is the second princess of Berry, and also your sister, your own flesh and blood." Standing beside the emperor, Rose replied coldly, So what if we share blood? I belong to Chariot now. The emperor rose as well and listed Nicola's crimes one by one. Not only was she disrespectful to me, the emperor, she even tried to abduct my wife. Tell me, does she deserve to die? But I'm still considering how best to punish her. Faced with such a blatant threat, the eldest prince by the king's side couldn't endure it. Drawing his sword, he charged forward. How dare you kidnap Nicola? But his blade had barely risen before Rose released a storm of flames. The firepower sent several of them flying. You really are a witch, just like the rumors say. The second prince had only just cursed her when he was shot. The emperor publicly and domineeringly protected his wife. How can my wife be insulted at will? He dragged Nicola forward and pressed a gun toward her on the ground. If you sign the same document, I will release her on the spot. Rose gave a wicked smile and added fuel to the fire. If you refuse, not only will you offend Chariot, you'll offend Barry as well. Nicola felt sure Rose couldn't possibly be this cruel. Rose couldn't even be bothered to look at her. Once they had the king's signature, she smiled and bid everyone goodbye. But the rescued Nicola was not happy at all. She rushed up, grabbed Rose's hand, and cried, calling for her old gentle sister to come back. Did she think Rose was a fool? Nicola knew very well that if she went back like this, she would definitely be cursed to death. How could she not hurry to find a scapegoat? Come back, sister. Let's be as happy as we used to be, okay? It would have been better if she hadn't mentioned the past. The moment she did, she exhausted the last of Rose's patience. A strange fire scorched across Nicola's face. Why don't you understand yet? Her gaze was merciless and icy. The flames kept intensifying. Nicola could only clutch her head and scream. Rose was sick of her, but the emperor asked, "Are you happy now? How could this possibly be enough?" Rose said, "You're not joking, are you?" Yes, she really was this thoroughly vicious. The emperor frowned, but then couldn't help bursting into laughter because the crueler she was, the more he loved her. So the two of them linked arms and cheerfully went home. She had only said one sentence, "I like it." And the emperor gave up everything for it. At this moment, the Sea King's face was glowing red, while Rose leisurely soaked in a bubble bath. "Your Majesty, what do you think of Shadow Star?" Shin stood outside the jade screen, unable to see much. But he did feel fortunate. "I'm glad you were able to marry that tyrant." Yes, the emperor had actually considered her feelings. Invading Barry had always been his goal. But once war broke out, there would be casualties in Chariot too. Thinking of her previous life, and the way those Chariot soldiers had died rushing forward. Just imagining it felt regrettable. Even though casualties in war were unavoidable, she still couldn't help wanting to reduce Chariot's losses. As dinner drew nearer, she still hadn't come to a decision because she didn't want to give up either invasion or deterrence. She hated her so-called family beyond measure. If she chose invasion, those people would just play pitiful and act weak again. The royal family of a victimized kingdom would beg allied nations for help, and these adorable soldiers would be turned into unforgivable villains. But that clearly wasn't the real point. What she couldn't stand was being made into the object of Barry's sympathy. She'd bet that even on the day they were executed, her family would still act fragile, making the people of Barry think the royal family had died unjustly. That would plant hidden trouble for Chariot's future rule. So she had to make those people die miserably without receiving anyone's sympathy. Whether king, queen, prince, or princess, all of them had to be utterly disgraced. She had originally been worried about Chariot's soldiers suffering casualties, but when a fresh cup of tea warmed her hands, she suddenly came fully awake. The tea leaves had been sent by Sasha that morning. So this was no longer the isolated, helpless life she'd had before. Revenge was important to her, which meant she had to make use of every person and every circumstance. When the emperor asked for her answer, she chose invasion without hesitation. Whether intelligence or magic, she was willing to do everything she could. But this opportunity was rare. Before the invasion, she had to lay some groundwork. When she finished, the emperor frowned, thinking it was something else. He hadn't expected his wife to be so ruthless, and he loved it. She didn't just want those people recorded in history with curses attached to their names. She wanted them turned into rats in the street, Barry's eternal stain. When Rose said all this, she was calm and wickedly charming, and she laid out the plan in exact detail. Before they had even started eating, the emperor understood what she meant. The plan was thorough, and the reasoning was sound. He supported it completely. He could even do things crazier than invasion itself. Though Rose refused with a smile, It was only because she didn't want Chariot to be reviled by the world. Still, the emperor had one question. Don't you have even the slightest hesitation? It's understandable to want your family reduced to ashes. But what about the people of Berry? But Rose knew very well that those people were no different from the royal family. After all, in her previous life, those so-called citizens at the guillotine had been no different from the royals either. Back then, she hadn't even been allowed outside, so she never had a chance to explain herself. But this time, she had chosen to become one of Chariot's people. Of course, my people are here now, and you're the one I deeply love. What was there left for her to hesitate over? She smiled brightly. The emperor, however, froze again. Then suddenly something occurred to him. He remembered a piece of information Shin had told him in the previous life. It would be very helpful to her plan, but to carry the plan out successfully, they would also need Sasha and Chloe, as long as it didn't affect the bigger picture. The emperor readily agreed. After dinner, he stood to leave, but his wife stopped him. "Your Majesty, may I sleep in your room tonight?" The emperor was so stunned he couldn't get a word out, but the outcome said everything. The two of them looked at each other. Ever since the day they married and decided on revenge, and everything afterward as they prepared to attack Berry together, everything had been perfect. But compared to the person in front of her, all of that still fell just a little short. Early the next morning, she went to Sasha's residence and revealed the secret of the attack on Berry, asking the two women to assist from the side. Being able to work for the Empress made them both as happy as children. No matter how much work they already had, they could immediately go handle whatever the Empress had just instructed. The three of them gathered together, with Shin's excellent tea on the table. Everyone enjoyed the peaceful moment. With their help, Rose felt even more confident about taking Berry. What she hadn't expected was how much they cared about her. Looking back, a large part of the reason she cherished Chariot was because of them. Because of Sasha, she had learned that Chariot's pastries were delicious. And ever since Chloe came here, Chariot's business had steadily increased. Sasha had even hired a tutor for Chloe's younger brother. Seeing them live well, Rose felt an inexplicable sense of comfort. Then Sasha brought another piece of good news. The pearls were selling incredibly well. Yet she didn't try to take credit, and instead praised the Empress's promotional methods as brilliant. Chloe, the workaholic, was thrilled. She had already chosen a list of shops, and believed there would be even more in the future. When they heard that the port where the pearls were harvested had once just been an abandoned fishing village, they seized the chance to flatter the Empress again. But as they talked, Chloe grew worried. The Kingdom of Flotto has been reorganizing its military lately. Could they be trying to seize back the port and the pearls? Shouldn't we take precautions in advance? Even the Emperor didn't know about this yet. While admiring how well-informed Chloe was, Rose also started thinking about dealing with the King of Flotto again. Since he didn't know how to reflect on himself, there was no reason to show mercy. She waved Shin over and whispered something in his ear. Chloe's intelligence had been timely and important, so Rose gave her a small token of appreciation. 2 matching pearl accessories. The 2 women immediately said it was too precious. But good things had to be shared with good sisters. How could she keep everything to herself? Besides, she not only had her own bracelet, she also had her own imperial palace. After letting her mind wander for a few seconds, they returned to discussing Flotto's sudden attack. It looked like her plan would have to move up. The timing was perfect. It was time for her to build a good relationship with the army and begin preparing to deal with the troublesome ones. A fish pond, once full of pollution, was now producing thousands upon thousands of pearls. The King of Flotto was furious because that fish pond had just become another nation's territory. Those Chariot thieves. If I discovered the pearls sooner, my kingdom would already be drowning in wealth. But Rose had tricked them and taken it away. It was all because the Chancellor's daughter had been too useless. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. The angrier he got, the less calm he became. He sprang up from his chair and ordered the army reorganized. He wanted to secretly snatch back the fish pond. Even if they were discovered, it didn't matter. Any pearls they could steal would be worth it. His shameless plan left even his secretary speechless. But the soldiers were excited. With swords in hand and mounted on horseback, they were grinning from ear to ear. But the moment they arrived at the port, they were dumbfounded. There was a chariot force stationed there. Each one looked fierce and imposing, and there were twice as many of them. The Flotto soldiers were so frightened their weapons shook in their hands. Then a chariot officer gave a single wave, and the whole force charged. In less than 3 seconds, Flotto soldiers were all taken down. News from the front was delivered to Rose in real time. She sipped tea leisurely, not worried about the operation at all. Chariot's soldiers against those weaklings? That was practically a guaranteed win. But the victory was also thanks to Sasha's intelligence. The emperor generously rewarded the third imperial mistress and handed the captives over to Rose to deal with. Looking at the battle report in his hand, even the emperor felt helpless. Wouldn't it have been better if the king of Flotto had just stayed put? Thanks to Rose's reminder, Flotto had to pay yet another astronomical indemnity. After this battle, Flotto was nearly bled dry and temporarily lost the ability to cause more trouble. Rose finally let out a sigh of relief. Although the battle had been an easy one, it was also a good chance for her to get closer to the soldiers. She asked the emperor for a favor. As empress, she wanted to go encourage them. Before the celebration banquet began, she arrived at the port in a carriage. A pair of burgundy pearl heels, matched with a simple yet refined and capable outfit, made for a truly striking appearance. It turned out she had brought Sasha with her too. But it was Sasha's first time appearing in public, and she was obviously nervous. Even her greeting to the soldiers was so soft, it sounded like a mosquito. The soldiers were all stunned. Why was the emperor's mistress here, and brought by the empress no less? But that was fine. Rose held out her hand. Lift your head and hold your chest high. Greeting the soldiers is a necessary part of public duty. To Sasha, it was as if she had seen the light that was about to change her life. She was no longer afraid and took the hand that had saved her. Ever since Rose took the first step in her revenge, her greedy family had finally begun to panic. Rumors that Nicola was going to marry the second Prince of Eanes soon reached Rose's ears. She found it extremely surprising. The King of Eanes and both his sons were infatuated with her sister. Yet the one Nicola ended up with was the prince who couldn't inherit the throne. But after thinking it over, it made sense. After all, Eanes had been forced to surrender because of Nicola, so of course they wanted Berry to pay the price. As she listened to the imperial mistress's gossip nonstop, Rose also grew eager to ask Chloe for more details. Everyone else thought it was a fine marriage and kept offering congratulations in front of her. But how could she let Nicola be happy, even if she knew Eanes was playing tricks? And that the second prince wasn't even Nicola's preferred type. The thought of Nicola leaving Berry for somewhere else, living a life where she was sharp-tongued but still loved by others, was something Rose could never allow. As she enjoyed a delicious steak, she calculated in her heart how she could achieve her goal before Nicola's wedding, or else find another method. Just as she was thinking this, someone suddenly said, "Your Majesty the Empress, are those the famous pearls?" Good eye. The imperial mistresses were all envious. They'd heard pearls were extremely rare, not only already circulating in other countries, but still as popular as ever. Yet the empress wore 2 long strands around her neck. Even her butler's clothes were set with so many pearls. Their sweet words came one after another. Rose handled them with ease. At the same time, she came up with a good idea. Soon she would be traveling far away. After the meeting ended, she had Shin go take care of something. She had thought this would require a members-only viewing, but the next moment, Shin returned to his quarters, putting a pearl into each light blue envelope, then sealing them with wax. Meanwhile, Berry had already descended into chaos. Chariot's army took down a village in just 2 minutes. Rose's trash father panicked at once, though he comforted himself that it was only a small village. When someone suggested counterattacking, his response was exactly what Rose had predicted. It's just one village. Not worth it. Besides, Berry and Chariot are still allied nations. Just as he was clinging to that bit of luck, a letter arrived from Emperor Jirbin of Chariot. No one in the family even dared play cards anymore. Yet her brother was still making sarcastic remarks, complaining about why they had ever married Rose off to Chariot, and saying his sister had been completely useless. Because they were allies, her father still held onto a sliver of hope as he opened the letter with trembling hands. But the next second, he froze. Chariot had formally declared war on Berry. Rose had only acted foolish once. Yet she had already toyed with a whole group of spirit nobles. Now that the kingdom of Flotto belonged to Chariot, she announced that she could sell pearls to the nobles. Instantly, an uproar broke out. "Can you really sell them to us?" "Yes, but please don't tell my family." Some people didn't understand. Others could already smell a scheme. But with just 2 sentences, Rose made the smart nobles understand at once. The royal family wants pearls too, but they only want them for free. And I rely heavily on my family. Rose wore a conflicted expression. Though she was empress, she had no authority to act that way. What a foolish woman. The blonde noble seemed to believe her completely. Then Rose brought out a box. Inside were huge pearls, one after another. The nobles were dazzled. Whoever offered the highest price would get priority. Using pearls as bait, she effortlessly stirred up internal chaos in an entire kingdom. She knew all too well what these so-called nobles were really like. In truth, they were the same as her family. In her previous life, that blonde noble had joined forces with her trash father to force the people to pay exorbitant taxes. These people were not only selfish, they were all her enemies. When she had been locked in prison in her previous life, Shin had told her that it was these people who had loudly advocated punishing her severely. And now, for the sake of a single pearl, they were begging her, and even starting to fight among themselves. Please sell the pearls to me. I'll pay more than Marquis Lowell. She savored the noisy competition. After letting the fire build for a while, she said, why don't I propose a solution? If you agree, everyone present can get pearls. On the way back, even Shin couldn't help praising her. Your Highness is as dazzling as ever. Don't you like it? No, it's just. You've shown me a different kind of charm as Empress. Was it a compliment or an insult? Rose blinked. I'll take it as praise. Master and servant walked one behind the other, unaware that two green-haired people passing by in a carriage had recognized Shin. Meanwhile, Chloe had also completed her task perfectly and had even investigated the details of Nicola's marriage to the second prince. You work so efficiently. Shall we have a drink together? Chloe looked utterly flattered, especially when she saw Shin bring out that bottle of fine wine. She was practically drooling. This tastes amazing. After only a few sips, she already felt light all over. Rose smiled at her indulgently. Would you like to try some champagne too? As Chloe watched Shin pour it for her, the alcohol gradually went to her head. She wanted to ask the Empress a question. Rose thought it was something important, but it turned out to be an embarrassingly personal topic. What do you find cute about His Majesty the Emperor? You and His Majesty are truly a match made in heaven. Even the way he looks at you is different. Chloe just kept talking and talking. Rose regretted it. She really shouldn't have let this woman drink so much. But thinking about it carefully, the Emperor's eyes were indeed captivating. The capable, decisive woman blushed every time the topic turned to romance. At the same time, Chariot's army had already taken 5 villages. But what they hadn't expected was that all of those villages had one thing in common. The farmland was intact, but every household lived in ruined homes. And without exception, each village had suffered fire just 2 days before Chariot's invasion. The soldiers immediately sent someone to the city to report it. Not only was every village dealing with infectious disease, there was no food either. The only saving grace was that the land itself remained in good condition. Rose had already guessed the situation wouldn't be very good, since Barry hardly managed those villages. But she had no right to criticize. If anyone really pursued blame, in her previous life, she too had been worse than a beast. So what do we do now? Can we still proceed according to the original plan? She felt a little guilty. Though they had taken several villages, it would require a tremendous amount of effort and money to restore them. But what was she saying? To the Emperor, these problems were only temporary. Not to mention that Chariot was rich now. Even if it weren't, those villages were still priceless. He smiled at her indulgently. Isn't that what you said? Rose couldn't help laughing, the sound clear as silver bells. So they proceeded according to the original plan. The Emperor ordered financial aid for the villages. The moment the order was given, the aides were in chaos. Some went to prepare medicine, some prepared food, and Shin silently brought over a sack of gold coins. Unexpectedly, the Emperor snapped. How presumptuous! He shrank back in fright and stammered out an apology, leaving the imperial couple momentarily stunned. Only after hearing his report did they learn that this money had been sent by Barry's nobles. The Emperor decided to carry out the invasion plan, and Rose even applauded from the side. How about we send officials directly from the royal capital this time? Wait. Her scumbag father panicked, and Ailey, young and hot-blooded, couldn't hold back his temper either. He called to his father and turned to leave. This agreement cannot be signed. They can't disrupt the kingdom's plans just for a few villages. Her scumbag father was practically admiring his son's courage when suddenly, with a whoosh, Rose set fire as a warning. Then she gave him a cold yet polite look, telling them to sit down. The familiar scene played out once again. The Emperor gave them 2 choices, either sign or die. Father and son gnashed their teeth for a long while, but clearly had no other path left. Holding the signed agreement, Rose instantly put on a smile and asked them to pass along her congratulations to Nicola on her wedding. Rose, how did you become like this? Her scumbag father finally couldn't help asking the question that had long troubled him. You used to be so lovely. What on earth happened? Rose almost laughed when she heard that. Her scumbag father panicked. I'm not joking. We used to love you so much. But the next second, he was left speechless. Rose had already heard Nicola's warning. Her biological father was actually her grandfather. Her scumbag father pretended not to understand, but that was fine. With a snap of Rose's fingers, her scumbag father and Ailey were pinned to the ground by soldiers. Flames burst from her hand again. I promise to return the villages to you. But whether the villagers will agree is another matter. Once they lose the support of the Chariot Empire, and all their grain is taken away by Barry. Her scumbag father and brother cried out as the fire scorched them, but she showed no mercy and intensified the flames, leaning into the Emperor's arms. How will the villagers view their homeland then? I'm looking forward to it.